bang meron sa panahon? Bakit nga ba ganun ang galaw ng mga ulap? Mababago ba ang sistema ng lipunang may problema? May sagot dyan ang siyensya. Hashtag ng DOST-STII, ang National Science and Technology Week. Madaming opportunities, contest, webinars, exhibits. Buksan ang isip sa science and technology. Science is for everyone. Science is for everybody. Ipagdiwang ng likhang Pinoy. Science is for you and me. Ating go. Tara na, sama na tayo na sa NSTW. Tara na, sama na tayo na sa NSTW. Tara na, sama na tayo na sa NSTW. Science is for everyone. Mayroong pag-asa at solusyon sa anumang sitwasyon gamit ang teknolohiya. Iisa ang layunin. Buhay at bayan.
Because in 10 minutes, we will be starting our morning session. Sorry, in 5 minutes, we will be starting our morning session.
Opportunities, contest, webinars, exhibits. Buksan ang isip sa science and technology. Science is for everyone. Science is for everybody. Ipagdiwang ng likhang Pinoy. Science is for you and me. Ating go kahit saan ka man. Nandito ang agham, walang maiiwan. Sama-sama tayo para sa community, para sa economy. Technology is the key and innovation's here. Science is for everyone. Science is for everybody. Ipagdiwang ng likhang Pinoy. Science is for you and me. Ating go. Tara na, sama na tayo na sa NSTW. Tara na, sama na tayo na sa NSTW. Tara na, sama na tayo na sa NSTW. Science is for everyone.
November 2025 will be extra exciting. 1. Yet innovative. Dahil muli nating ipagdiriwang ang National Science, Technology and Innovation Week. Humanda sa muling pagbabalik ng isa sa mga pinaka-aabangang selebrasyon sa Pilipinas. The Department of Science and Technology proudly invites you to the celebration of 2025 NSTW in the WAG City, Ilocos Norte, happening this November 18 to 21. Tara na sa lawag ngayong Nobyembre. Sumama sa isang makabuluhang pagtitipon para sa agham, teknolohiya, inobasyon, kultura at advokasya. Matuto, makisaya, mamangha, at tumuklas ng mga bagong oportunidad para sa lahat. And together, let's build the smart and sustainable communities through DOST. Upang manatiling updated sa mga kaganapan, just visit and follow NSTW at DOST Region 1 website and Facebook page. O di kaya naman i-download na ang NSTW 2025 app sa inyong mga mobile phones. Ano pang hinihintay nyo? Set the date at magkita-kita tayo sa 2025 NSTW mga kaagham. Intayot sa Norte!
Hey, everyone, tara na! May bagong kaalaman mula sa DOST, yeah. Offline, libre, pang masa, Starbucks ang bit-bit natin. Bawat sulok ng bansa may aral na dala. Kahit walang signal, Starbucks ang bida. Science, tech lang lihod, dito ay kumpleto. Isang pindot lang, kaalaman ay totoo. Gamit mo sa eskwela, tulay sa pangarap mo. DOST. Starbucks, wala nang imposible. Mag-research ka na, ang dali lang, diba? Starbucks, future mo'y handa na. Guro, estudyante, pati nanay din. May learning tools para sa layunin. Many videos, e-books, may thesis na content. Ang tunay na kasangga natin. Yoho, usamang serbisyo Starbucks. Libre kahit saan to. For STEAM and beyond, Starbucks is the key. Starbucks, learning ay pinaisi. STARBOOKS, offline library, wala nang internet stress. Starbucks, e-learning is the best. Starbucks, knowledge dito ay success. Yoho, yoho.
Good morning once again, everyone. We will now start our hybrid session in connection with the theme, Lace Up Libraries,
a hub for cultural exploration and unity through partnership. Kaya naman, allow us to warmly welcome you all, our dear participants, here at the DOST-STII Mini Theater, and of course, to all of you tuning in through Facebook Live. Sa ngayon, we have 82 viewers and tumataas pa po. And thank you for being part of this second hybrid seminar. We're thrilled to have you here with us today.
That's right, Miss Chai. Now, we've got an exciting day ahead, so whether you're joining us in person or online, get ready for a day full of learning, insight, and meaningful discussions. We hope you'll find the sessions enriching and inspiring.
Yes. I am Ms. Shirley Lim, Science Research Assistant of the DOST Science and Technology Information Institute.
And I am Miss Jamila Vanessa Hilboy, also a Science Research Assistant of DOST-STII. And we are your moderators today and for the succeeding hybrid seminars.
And Ms. Jam, let's have a quick shout out muna sa ating participants online while naghihintay sa iba to join our Facebook Live.
Ayan, Miss Chai, from Anita Arquita, good morning po from Balingasag Municipal Library. God bless daw po sa ating lahat.
Yes. And we have here Sir John Edward watching from Legazpi City, Albay.
Ayan, sabi naman po ni Miss Jan Tami Sinaraha, good morning, DOST-STII.
We also have Ma'am Ophel De Castro from Kalawan, Sulong, Laguna.
Ayan, marami po tayong mga participants, no? Good morning daw po sa ating lahat. Ayan, sige. Keep your comments coming, guys. Ayan.
Okay. And while waiting din sa kanila, Miss Jam, turuan mo nga sila paano yung action for the lace up.
Okay, so kahapon po, kung naka-tune in po tayo kahapon, na ituro po ni Miss Irene and Miss Grace kung papaano ang lace up. So today, uulitin po natin, no, Miss Chai. So ganito lang po, ikot to the left and up to the right. Ayan.
Okay.
Lace up, libraries. Ayan. So, one more time po. Practicein natin. Again, 1, 2, 3. Lace up, libraries. Ayan. Ayan, I think, Miss Choi, mas dumadami pa ang ating mga comments. Ayan. Shout out po, The Refiners Christian School Incorporated. Again, from Kalawan, Sulong, Laguna.
We have here from Beslic College of the Philippines, si Ma'am Josie Victoria Tuzon.
And meron din po from Miss Vina Gubot. Good morning po, watching from Westmead International School, Batangas City.
Right.
So, Miss Chai, later, no, magkakaroon tayo ng mas marami pang shout-out. So, in the meantime, since today is the second day of our LIS Month celebration this year, let's have a recap of our activities yesterday. So, to start off, Yesterday, Tuesday, November 11, we officially opened our LAS Month celebration with the inspiring remarks from our DOST Undersecretary for Scientific and Technical Services, Ms. Maridun Ausahagun, who reminded us that libraries are not just places, but movements.
Indeed. And yesterday, we also had the honor of hearing a special video message from the Director of the National Library of the Philippines, Director Cesar Gilbert Adriano, who graciously sent his warm regards.
And gracing us with her presence yesterday, a member of the Professional Regulatory Board for Librarians, Honorable Lourdes T. David. Honorable David delivered our keynote speech on Lace Up, where she focused on informing us of the 2025 trends in science librarianship, as well as the implications and challenges for each trend.
And of course, Ms. Jam, together with our guests, we also launched the DOST-STII Library Maker Space. So the DOST-STII Library Maker Space is a dedicated collaborative space where library clients can engage in hands-on creative activity that combine technology, craft, and innovation. So if you visit us here sa DOST-STII, you could could have a creative activity here in our library maker space. Another highlight was the opening of our partner exhibit and book fair featuring our valued partners. So meron tayo Persons with Disability Affairs Office from Taguig. We also have Book Week Marketing. Our partner Learning is Fun, and Felta Multimedia Incorporated, and of course, Science Star Corporation.
Yes, Miss Shai. Siyempre, hindi mawawala ang library tour with our guests yesterday. So dito na ipakita po natin ang changes sa ating pong system and facilities ng ating library.
And in the afternoon, we had our first hybrid seminar on the topic titled The Future of Memory, Safeguarding Our Digital Heritage. This was delivered by the Library 5 and Chief of the Bibliographic Services Division of the National Library of the Philippines, Ms. Jennifer Dimasaka.
Ayan, grabe talaga Miss Chai. Unang araw pa lang natin yesterday pero nag-uumapaw na tayo sa activities. Kaya naman watch out for our activities in the coming days because we have so much in store for you all.
And just like this morning, Miss Jam, we will delve into a topic that invite us to look deeper into the role of libraries in our society.
And as we continue to face pressing issues, these challenges reminds us of the need for spaces that uphold truth, learning, and civic engagement.
And that brings us to our topic for this hybrid session, the quiet radicalism of libraries as civic infrastructure. But before we introduce our resource speaker, let's run through our house rules first, Ms. Jam.
Ayan. So for our house rules po, we encourage everyone to actively participate and be courteous. Also, avoid switch tasking. And lastly, provide accurate information po. I-ensure po natin na tama po ang spelling ng ating mga pangalan sa evaluation form. So the evaluation link po will be displayed on screen and in the Facebook live stream comment section bago po mag-end ang ating seminar.
Yes.
For the next slide po.
And we have also the safety protocols for our on-site participants. So cover your mouth when coughing or sneezing. Also, please wear a mask if you have cough or colds. If you feel unwell or witness If you feel unwell or witness a medical emergency, inform the Secretariat immediately for assistance. Also, in case of an earthquake, follow the drop, cover, and hold method and proceed to the assembly area. And in case of fire naman, stay calm and proceed to the fire exit. Go directly to the assembly area.
Ayan, Miss Chai. So ready na po tayo to introduce our speaker?
Yes. So now allow us to introduce our resource speaker for this topic. Our resource speaker is a faculty member at the University of the Philippines School of Library and Information Studies and director of its Publics Archives and Data Lab or Panda Lab. He is also the senior documentalist of Euridocs, a Geneva-based NGO supporting human rights documentation worldwide, and the founding director of the National Film Archives of the Philippines, now the Philippine Film Archives. Our resource speaker holds a PhD in informatics from the University of California, Irvine, an MA in moving image archiving and preservation from New York University, and a BA in social sciences and communication from Ateneo de Manila University. Part of his work explores how information systems, collecting institutions, and memory organizations can continue to serve as civic infrastructures, quietly radical in how they sustain justice, care, and collective life alongside and sometimes against the accelerating currents of the digital age.
Participants and guests, please welcome our resource speaker, Dr. Benedict Salazar Olgado.
Good morning. Nasaan yung camera? Okay, wow. Parang influencer lang eh, no? Good morning to everyone who's here. Good morning to everyone who's online. It is a pleasure to be here right now. I would like to thank the DOST-STII Science and Technology Information Institute for inviting me to celebrate the Library and Information Services Month. So, first time ko dito sa premises. If you haven't visited, parang taga dito. Bisita kayo. And so it's always a pleasure to be surrounded by new faces and old faces as well. My talk this morning is an offshoot of the theme of this year's celebration that looks at libraries as hub for cultural exploration and unity through partnership, or lace up. So my talk is called The Quiet Radicalism of Libraries as Civic Infrastructures. And when I was first invited to be part of the celebration, I was thinking about like what I could talk about. And then I realized, no, this is a celebration of the profession. And so I was thinking about how do we best celebrate a profession than by looking back at the roots and the history of the profession itself, but at the same time, wishing the best for it as it moves forward. And therefore, that is the main thrust of this particular talk. So I would like us to explore really what library work and information services is all about, with the hopes of really reimagining it as both a return and also a form of dismantling, so that we can create better libraries as civic infrastructures. It sounds like a mouthful, pero we'll go through it beat by beat as we go through this short talk, so to speak. So there are four main beats na I want to cover in this particular discussion, right? First of which is I'm going to talk about libraries as infrastructure. So kahapon, pati yung mga susunod na topics, we always talk about like libraries as a third space. We talk about library as movement from yesterday's discussion, right? I'm introducing, or rather reintroducing, a new way of looking at libraries that specifically is, what if we look at libraries as infrastructures? And what does that actually mean? Or to be more precise, what if we look at libraries as civic infrastructures, regardless of the typology of the library, right? Whether you're a science library or you're an academic library, a public library or a university library, I'm making an argument that regardless of the typology of your particular library, at the core of library service and information service is the idea of public service, which then delves into the third beat, which is an invitation for us to actually recognize that librarianship and information science inherently is actually a radical profession. Wow, radical. Talk about radicalism within a government entity. But I'm actually going to talk about why this is not necessarily new, that to talk about radicalism as a profession is a return to our roots. And what can we do to actually live up to it? Which then leads to the more pragmatic part of this talk, which is to talk about what are some quiet actions that we can do, or what are the small things that we can enact within our libraries and information centers to actually return and strengthen this idea that our libraries are indeed radical civic infrastructures. Okay. So wala masyadong engagement within the next couple of hours, so this would sound like more of a lecture to a certain extent, but I would love to see later on after this talk to see the comments and feedback then sa Facebook group. I would be delighted to see those comments, and we might have time for some Q&A. Okay, we might have time for some Q&A. So makikita natin. So I'll be able to actually engage you in your discussions. Okay, so when we think of infrastructure, we often think of roads, right? We often think of bridges. We often think of the material mechanics that allow our society to function, that allow our society to move, right? I actively also looked and use the term infrastructure kasi uso siya ngayon. Diba? Uso siya ngayon yung mga infrastructure, diba? Mga infrastructure projects, mga committee na naghahanap ng mga nawawalang infrastructure initiatives. But what does it actually mean to be an infrastructure, right? The other angle that I'm making in this argument is that if we what does it actually mean to be an infrastructure, right? Infrastructure. The other angle that I'm making in this argument is that what does it actually mean to be an infrastructure, right? Infrastructure. The other angle that I'm making in this argument is that what does it actually mean to be an infrastructure, right? Infrastructure. The other ayan. For a while, parang nasa time-space continuum ako na parang I can hear my past self. Yung nasa online, hindi niya yata yun na-capture. But I can hear my past self talking. Anyways, so the other gesture here is that if we make an argument or if we see the libraries as infrastructure, then it needs the same level of support and scrutiny that our other public infrastructure are currently being given, right? So kung meron tayong milyon-milyon at bilyon-bilyon binibigay ng gobyerno sa ating mga infrastructure projects, we're also making an argument that they should do that for libraries. At the same time, if we are also critiquing or criticizing or evaluating the effectiveness of other infrastructure projects, the same can be said about our libraries as infrastructure projects as well. So what exactly are infrastructures, or what is infrastructure? Dito I'm gonna put my science and technology, sakto, my science and technology studies hat, which is the field or the discipline that actually studies infrastructure writ large, right? So Susan Lee Starr, which is one of the key thinkers of infrastructure, simply puts or defines infrastructure as that which other things run on. Or kumbaga, infrastructure are ito yung mga bagay kung saan ito yung mga bagay na nag-enable sa atin to actually do things, right? Whether roads that enable us to travel, pipes that enable our buildings to function properly and maintain cleanliness, internet infrastructure that enables us to connect with each other, right? Without these infrastructure, society will cease to function or will cease to operate. While often we think of infrastructure as that being the material, diba? Roads, bridges, buildings, so to speak. Infrastructure is more broad here, that we're actually pertaining to the arrangements of people, materials, standards, and routines that quietly make certain ways of life possible. So we'll hold on to this particular succinct, simple definition of what infrastructure is, and then we'll go through, or rather I'll go through some of the key ideas and politics around infrastructure. So again, that we define infrastructure as the arrangements of people, materials, standards, and routines that quietly make certain ways of life possible. I'll go through the tenets or some key aspects of infrastructure and then connect it later on to libraries as infrastructure. So I'll show you there's this first photo. So makikita nyo dito is like one key quote-unquote infrastructure, which is the roads. So makikita nyo dito yung daan. Yung isa nyo pang mapapansin dito is the dirt path. Kita nyo doon. Kung saan these dirt paths usually are created kasi yung mga tao naglalakad through the park. Sa pagdaan ng mga tao din sa park, obviously nagkakaroon sila ng friction, nagkakaroon ng marks, and then eventually, though hindi siya dinesign ng mga tao, makikita nyo na may sarili na siyang path na nakikreate outside of the actual infrastructure na na-design. Babalikan natin yung path na to later on. Mapapansin nyo, along yung semento mismo, which is the road itself, may other infrastructures na katabi niya. In this case, yung ilaw, right? Kasi usually, pag tinanong ka, saan mo ilalagay yung mga ilaw, right? Lighting stuff. You're gonna put that right next to the road. At the same manner, kapag ikaw naman yung maintenance, kailangan mo maglagay ng basurahan. Saan mo ilalagay yung basurahan? Usually, ilalagay mo siya sa corner ng mga roads kung saan doon nagkakaroon ng intersection yung mga tao. Right? Eventually, kunwari itong mga roads na to, kailangan mo maglagay ng tubig or ng kuryente. Most infrastructure projects will create those subsidiary infrastructure along those roads as well. So kung na yung pipe, yung tubo, yung internet wiring, ifo-follow niya din kung paano yung shape nung nakasamento, right? So what does this mean for us in terms of infrastructure? Well, one of the key understanding is that infrastructure is built on top of infrastructure, meaning that most infrastructures that we have don't come out of nowhere. Magsisimula talaga siya on existing mechanisms or existing materialities na na-establish. So katulad nito ng sinabi ko, magsa-start siya with that, but then you'll start building things on top of that as well, right? Or historically, for example, sa atin dito sa Pilipinas, our main infrastructure is the environment, right? So often, because as a society, we need access to both food and also transportation, certain societies or communities in the Philippines have built their houses right next to rivers, right? Because the river is a natural, quote-unquote, natural infrastructure that we live in. So susundan natin yung mga rivers na yon, and eventually that's where we're going to build the things that we want to actually build on as well, right? Or kung titingnan natin yung mga highways or yung mga roads, right? So roads, automatically, saan tayo magtatayo ng mga bahay? Right next to the highways or roads. Yung mga katulad ko na taga-probinsya, di ba? Parang magtataka yung mga taga-Maynila, bakit lahat nakatira sa highway? Kasi wala kaming konsepto outside of the highway, right? Or kung meron man maliliit na eskinita or streets, but the entire lifeblood of a community revolves around that particular roads, right? So what we're saying here is that infrastructure is built on top of infrastructure. That said, there's pros and cons dito, right? If we get the infrastructure right at the first time, that means anything na i-build natin on top of that will strengthen yung foundation niya. But if we build infrastructure mali sa simula, we're gonna end up creating things on top of things na mali naman din talaga. So balik tayo dito sa picture na tinitingnan natin. So, kung yung mga tao pala dito dumadaan, na yung nag-design na to, hindi naisip na doon dapat dumadaan yung mga tao, walang ilaw within this particular path. At the same time, yung mga end users mo or the people who goes through this will end up walking through the mud kapag umulan, right? So, lahat ng ginagawa nila is basically saying that, oh, well, if this is a sign wherein like maybe we didn't get the first infrastructure right. Tapos kung dadagdagan lang natin ng dadagdagan ng new technologies or ng new mechanisms or new policies, yung old infrastructure, it likely is not going to be effective. It's actually going to worsen things accordingly. So a good designer, engineer, or infrastructure developer will actually see the practices of the end users. In this case, makikita nila yung mga tao na, alam mo, dito dumadaan yung mga tao eh. So, ano kailangan natin gawin? We need to actually pave that particular road. We need to actually put lights on that particular road. We actually need to put trash cans and maybe additional piping in those additional road. Which then goes back to this whole idea that infrastructure is built on top of infrastructure. Sige, panghawakan lang natin yan. I-connect natin to sa libraries later on. Pero alam ko yung mga librarians na iisip na, oo nga sir, no? Oo nga, no? Parang may mga bago tayong new technologies, pero nilalagay natin siya on top of systems na parang mali yata yung systems na yun in the first place. So we're actually not improving things, even though the technology is supposed to improve things. But if it is built on top of a thing that is already broken, then we're not actually solving the problem, right? Next point on infrastructure. This is a picture of a bridge that was built in New York City back in 1929. Papunta tong bridge. So if you go through that road, you will lead to the Jones Beach State Park. So isa siyang beach back in the 1920s. And the whole idea here is, para saan ba yung beach, diba? The beach is supposed to be a public good. Everyone should be able to go to the beach and enjoy the beach, right? Regardless of color, race, creed, class, everyone should be able to go to the beach, right? But the designer of this particular bridge, the master builder, Robert Moses, kasi they needed to connect one part over the other part, nag-create sila ng bridge. So seemingly innocent, diba? Parang, okay, so that's a useful bridge. The problem there is that, by design, yung height ng bridge na yan is so low na hindi makakadaan yung bus. What does that mean? That means na para makapunta sa beach, ang makakapunta lang talaga dyan ay mga tao na mayroong kotse. Because the people who couldn't afford private cars will have to take the bus. But the bus can't pass through this particular bridge dun sa ilalim. This means that there are certain infrastructures that, when designed, are actually very political. Or to be more precise, they are exclusionary by design. Diba? Hindi natin iniisip pa minsan yung mga ginagawa natin na ini-introduce nating polisiya or ini-introduce nating practices or mga technologies na binibigay natin, right? But the thing is, often these artifacts or these infrastructures are never neutral, which is our second point. So infrastructure is built on infrastructure. The second point, that infrastructure is not neutral. It never is. Diba? Akala natin parang, hindi, ano lang naman yan, pintuan lang yan. Hindi, ano lang naman yan, upuan lang yan. Diba? So, babalikan natin to later when we talk about libraries, but you can start imagining things na parang, oo nga no, yung decision na ilagay dito yung pintuan or ilagay dito yung front desk has very specific implications on how we actually offer our services and how our libraries are actually perceived. What I'm pointing out is that these decisions are extremely value-laden. It has assumptions on who our users are, in this case, or who we want our users to be. So nangyari dito is, the beach as a public good is still a public good, but because the design of infrastructure then suddenly chose who can actually access that good and who cannot, right? Because infrastructure can give us affordances, it enables us to do things, but infrastructure also constricts us or restrains what we can do. So paminsan kasi inisip lang natin na, oh, infrastructure enables things, but actually, it also disables or constrains us from doing certain things as well. And that's an important thing for us to hold on to. Next, makikita nyo dito, which is something painfully we are aware of, balik tayo sa local context natin, with regards to kung bakit parang, uy, lahat ng Pilipino alam na ngayon yung word na infrastructure. So medyo favorite ko ngayon to talk about infrastructure because even though I've been thinking about it through years, through decades, hindi pa siya parang a terminology na pinapangatawanan or hinahawakan ng mga Pilipino. So ngayon parang, yes, I can talk about infrastructure because I don't want to talk about infrastructure this way, but I think it's important for us to actually pay attention to it. So the thing with infrastructure is often we shouldn't really be paying attention to it, right? Because if it works, it works, right? Parang if all of our roads are functioning, if the traffic light is working, if the flood control projects are doing its job, hindi natin mapapansin, right? We'll be like, okay, walang flood, yay, let's move on with our lives. Pero napapansin natin yung infrastructure when it's broken. Or kapag hindi siya nag-exist. Akala natin nag-exist, hindi pala siya nag-exist. So, mapapansin natin then that is the case, right? Which is the third tenet of our understanding of infrastructure. It is often invisible until it breaks down. And that's by design, right? Ito yung mga bagay na pinagkakatiwala natin, na niniwala tayo na kung sino man yung nagde-design at nagbe-maintain ng mga to are actually doing their job. Right? And then, pag hindi siya gumagana, saka natin siya nakikita at saka tayo nagrereklamo. Diba? Parang, ay, sira, may pothole pala doon. Hindi pala nagwo-work yung roads or yung daan papunta dito sa DOST na parang, bakit sobrang traffic? Diba? Pero kung hindi naman siya, ideally, kung hindi siya traffic, hindi naman natin masasabi, wow, aga-aga walang traffic. Saka lang natin siya napapansin natin na gumaan yung buhay natin because in the first place, it was broken. Right? The infrastructure was so difficult, was so constrained, was constraining what we can do that when it gets fixed, we actually feel it. So the same goes when it comes to very good infrastructure. Mapapansin natin siya once, vis-a-vis the thing because it didn't work before, but ideally, hindi dapat natin siya papansinin. Parang yung mga elevator sa MRT, diba? Parang, pag gumagana siya, parang, okay, dapat naman talaga gumana siya. Tapos pag hindi siya gumagana, saka lang natin na-realize, ang taas pala nung, ano yung paborito nating mountain, mga Mount Shaw, diba? Parang, taas pala ito ng Mount Shaw. Sinong napakatalinong tao na nag-decide na ganitong kataas yung tren? And we only realize that because suddenly, the elevator is not working, right? Or in the case if you're, for example, a PWD, that's when you actually realize that the entire world is not designed for you, right? Which is another reason why, while for us nakikita natin na nagwo-work itong mundo natin na iniikutan natin, but for some people, actually for a huge considerable population, that's when they realize that the world is not designed for us. For us, the world is actually broken. Right? Because bakit yung ano ba to? Bakit yung what do you call this? Ang hump ang taas-taas, 'di ba? Or parang requirement na magkaroon ng PWD para makadaan yung mga tao, makapasok, makalabas ng library or in a particular building. Pero bakit napaka-steep nung pagkakagawa ng design, right? Or for example, nakalipas na mga buwan, a few months ago, right, when we saw that incident that happened in NAIA, na parang, the whole time, akala natin nagwo-work yung bollard ba yun? Yung bollard, tapos yung hindi siya gumana, doon lang natin napansin na, this is actually broken to the cost of human lives, right? And it shouldn't actually reach that point, but we never really scrutinize infrastructure because we trust that it works, right? And we only actually, and that's the beauty of working infrastructure. It's supposed to be invisible. But then when it is broken, it tells us what needs to be fixed. And also, it also tells us what are the embedded politics or values na nakalagay dun sa, na naka-embed dun sa paggawa ng infrastructure na yon. So these three things, right? Ito yung gusto kong maintindihan natin when we talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is built on top of infrastructure. Infrastructure is not neutral, and infrastructure often is invisible until it breaks down, right? So, dami beses ko nasabi yung infrastructure. Kapag hindi nyo pa naging favorite word yung infrastructure today, ewan ko na lang. So how does this connect to libraries? Or rather, my invitation for us to not only look at libraries as third spaces or to look at libraries as hubs. These are very important rhetorical literature and assertions of libraries. And there's a lot that has been written about this as well. And I think the idea that libraries as infrastructure even strengthens these positions, right? Or these conceptualizations of what libraries are. So what does it mean then for libraries to be infrastructures? Going back to my 3 points, right? First one is that libraries are built on top of other infrastructures. Meaning that, ang unang-una is that our libraries are built on very specific knowledge systems, right? So kung ano yung how the world conceives itself and what the knowledge base and knowledge systems we create is the foundation of the libraries that we establish, right? So for example, our cataloging systems that we inherit are particularly based on specific ways of seeing the world, right? A very specific Western Northern way of actually seeing the world. And so we build things on top of this particular thing. We might make some edits, we might make some changes, we might make some edits on how we actually appropriate and utilize these particular cataloging systems, but fundamentally we are dependent on them, right? At the same time, that the idea of the librarianship as a profession itself, diba, is still built on other ideas of collecting practices or information organization. So we're saying that our libraries are primarily dependent and have always been dependent on these existing infrastructures or knowledge systems, to be more precise. In addition to, yung mga bagong technologies na in-introduce natin dito, ito nabanggit to, for example, ni Ma'am Lou kahapon, is that, you know, these introduction of new technologies often are new technologies on top of things that already exists, right? So for example, if you're looking at newer information storage systems, right, those information storage systems will only be useful if nag-exist pa, or rather to be more precise, how good the preceding information at the storage systems actually operate. So for example, ang pinakauso ngayon obviously is that we're talking about how can we actually use artificial intelligence and machine learning in our library services, right? So my colleague, Professor Dan Anthony Dorado, is doing a great job. Ano siya? Paikot-ikot na siya sa buong Pilipinas talking about how to actually use it. I think nakadaan na din yata siya dito sa DOST, no? Bising, lahat na yata, additional plugging pa, kung gusto niyo din, tawagan niyo ulit si Professor. Pagod na po siya. Niloloko ko siya, sabi ko, gumamit ka na lang ng AI na lang yung padalhin mo ng mga tao. Anyways, but the point is, and these are things that he also talks about in his talk, that the effectiveness of these artificial intelligence or machine learning tools is still going to be dependent on how good the actual operation of the library is and how knowledgeable the librarians actually are, right? We're basically putting all of these new technologies on existing systems. If the system is broken to begin with, these new technologies actually, they're not gonna fix it, right? Actually, they might not even work, right? So in the government, for example, they're thinking about, oh, how can we actually use these technologies to improve records management, for example, or to give information to our clientele, right? So umuso bigla na bawat government website may chatbots. The problem is, these new technologies are still going to be dependent on existing information. Like, meron ba tayong records of inquiries from our public before that we can actually train these new technologies on? Or iniisip nila, oh, greater efficiency. Okay, but nakaayos ba yung records natin sa institution in the first place? Na-digitize mo ba siya to begin with? Because AI and ML won't actually be able to tap into all of these information if the information on paper are actually not organized or not digitized in the first place. So this is what we're seeing, this is what we're talking about when we talk about infrastructure on top of infrastructure. They need to work together, otherwise the new things that you're going to build on top of things that doesn't work will actually likely will create more harm than the efficiency that you perceive that it will actually give, right? But the other point here with the idea of libraries being built on top of other infrastructures is specifically that, right? Na parang we need to be aware that saan ba nanggagaling in the first place, or ano yung pinanggagalingan nung libraries natin, yung policies, yung protocols ng systems. Kasi sometimes when people ask, so why do you do the things the way you do them? Often, sasabihin natin, ay, sir, yun na po kasi yung nakagisnan. Yun na po kasi sir yung nakagisnan. Or ay, yun po yung nakalagay sa polisiya. Ay, yun po yung nakaayon sa batas. Right? And often we just go through the motions of like doing the same thing. This is another example of things on top of things, right? So when we question these systems, policies, or practices, we don't necessarily intend to parang discredit them. The idea is to understand the rationale on why they are the way they are, right? Kasi para mas maintindihan natin, mas ma-appreciate natin siya, or kung may pagkukulang man, maayos natin siya accordingly. Because to the second point, libraries are not neutral, right? They never are. Alam na natin to, di ba? From, if for example, you are the librarian and you're handling collection management, the idea of choosing, limited yung budget mo, meron kang 1 million, asa. Kunwari meron kang budget for the year to acquire new books. You already make a specific political/epistemic decision on what books will be included in your library. So even at the point of appraisal, even at the point of acquisition, you're already making decisions that are never neutral. Kahit gawan mo na kahit anong rubric yan, di ba? Gumawa ka ng evaluation mechanisms na or in our case, kunwari sa university libraries, papadaan nila sa certain faculty members. So, kahit ikaw mismo, as a librarian, sabihin mo, hindi naman po ako yung nag-decide, yung faculty po yung nag-decide. Political na yung decision ng faculty on what books would be included and what not included. But even ikaw as a librarian have actively decided who to ask. And in your case, you specifically decided that you're going to ask the faculty members to make that decision for the end users that are actually the students, right? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. What I'm trying to say is that that is never a neutral decision. Isa pa lang yan, di ba? Balik tayo dun sa isang example natin kanina in terms of like certain things such as saan mo ilalagay yung front desk or yung decision mo na ang unang makikita ng tao pag pumasok sa library ay si manong security guard, right? All due respect and have high respects for our security guard, but that's also a specific decision on bakit ang entrada ng libraries natin is a security guard, right? If you really think about it, that the idea that you're putting a security guard in front of your library sets a very specific message to your end users, right? If we are to be generous about it, it tells us that, hey, enter the library and you'll be safe here because a security guard will take care of you. That's a generous reading, right? Another reading is to say, we don't trust every single person that enters the library, and therefore, we just wanted to make sure that there is a mechanism to sift through their end users. And so, syempre, iba-iba tayo ng feelings about security guards, right? Like, may performative security guard na may stick, ganyan. Tapos parang, okay, kunwari, naglolokohan lang tayo. Parang, kuya, naglolokohan lang naman tayo. Wala ka din naman chinecheck dito, diba? Or there are more other libraries that actually have stringent policies on who gets to enter and who gets to not enter. But that decision is often handled primarily or initially by the person in front, right? Of course, there are good libraries. There are libraries who the guards themselves become part of the library system and have trained and have certain level of warmth, right? Like for example, sa UP, we all know Kuya Magno sa main lib, right? So it's like this particular set of what I'm trying to say is that these particular decisions have implications on how the library operates and what our values are. Or certain policies, for example, such as the existence of library fines, right? Which babalikan natin later. Like, what is the idea of a library fine, right? Saan natin nakuha yung ideya na kailangan natin ng library fines? And why is, in the library world, over the span of 10 years, you're actually seeing more and more libraries dropping the idea of fines, right? And then there are other libraries that are nagdo-double down sila na parang, no, kailangan actually natin siya. So we'll talk about that later on. But the point here is that all of those decisions, policies, systems, design, are never neutral. Therefore, the library is never neutral. Which leads us to the last point of this, making connections between libraries and infrastructure, that libraries are invisible until they break down. The reality is most libraries are invisible. And that's the painful reality specifically here in our country, right? Whether you're an academic library, institutional library, a special library, children's library, often people don't see us, right? They use us, but then at the end of the day, they're like, well, there's a library, right? But people only realize that the library exists or does not exist in certain matters when there is a breakdown, right? For example, if a if a student finals week na-realize nila, wala pala, I was able to catch myself, use the right word. Okay, wala pala akong there's no space for me to study. So the whole semester, hindi nila napansin na the library exists until finals week, tapos pumunta sila sa library, tapos nakita nila, ay wala nang upuan, wala nang table, may library pala. Tapos naikot niya na yung buong library. So now they know that the libraries exist, right? But the point is that they only realize it because things are starting to break down. Or again, in our case at the university, it's like where everyone is painfully aware that the library exists, the main library exists, precisely because physically it currently does not, at least the main building. So that's, again, a proof that our libraries are invisible until they break down. Or if you're a science library, for example, they'll realize na parang, oh, okay, I need new materials about like a 2025 study on like floating nuclear reactors, right? Tapos magtatanong sila, saan kaya tayo makakahanap ng ganong information? At tanong mo dun sa library. And then the library goes like, wala po kaming subscription for that particular database kasi nagsha-shuffle po kami every year, right? And that's when they realize, okay, maybe we should actually pay attention and give more resources to the library because it should function, but it's not functioning the way we think it should function, right? Or in this case, kunwari, balik natin dun sa flooding, diba? With the storms, suddenly we realize yung mga colleagues natin across the country are posting the dire situation of libraries post-flooding, right? Doon natin makikita na, ay may library pala din sa barangay ko. Actually, si barangay captain pala nag-create ng reading nook right next to the daycare center, right? Or may isip mo na parang nakita mo yung kabilang bayan, may nag-post na nasira yung library nila, tas ikaw, walang nasirang library sa bayan ko. Kasi wala kaming library in the first place. But these are, again, indicators of this idea that we are only visible when we are at the point of breakdown. So what does this all mean for us, diba? So my first main idea this morning is that assertion that libraries are infrastructure. They are built upon and sustain inherited systems, whether those systems are good or bad. They encode values shaped by particular actors, whether those values are good or bad. They require care to be maintained, right? Hindi lang siya, kasi inisip natin, this is an important fact of infrastructure, like it constantly needs maintenance. Yan yung nagiging problem natin with a lot of our infrastructure projects, right? Like for example, gagawa ng nakakuha si congressman ng pera, so gumawa siya ng overpriced na roads, pero yun lang yun. Pero wala namang budget yung bayan to actually maintain the roads. So over time, the roads will actually be destroyed, and then there will be a new project to create another, to repair that road supposedly, which is maglalagay lang tayo ng asphalt, as opposed to at the beginning to actually create better roads that will sustain and also then actively fix them. Hindi na natin dapat iniintay na masira talaga yung road. At the first sight of wear and tear, we should be fixing it already, right? Not at the point of its brokenness. My point being here is that maintenance is a key part of understanding libraries as infrastructure. If we see our libraries as infrastructure that needs to be maintained, then we will approach it that way as well, right? Hindi lang yung, ay, nag-establish tayo ng library, diba? Parang, there's a number of like great philanthropic initiatives that builds libraries across the country, right? Usually with like private donations or in partnership with local communities. But the problem with some of these initiatives actually is the problem with most of these initiatives is that we only put resources at the point of establishment, but we never put resources at the point of actually maintaining these libraries or information hubs. And that becomes the problem, right? But finally, and sometimes, libraries as infrastructures also demand that we dismantle parts of them altogether. So this is more of a series of provocation for us. Just because we believe that the library is a public good doesn't necessarily mean that everything that the library does is correct, or that it is actually doing things in service of the community, right? So libraries are not simply buildings or repositories, but infrastructures that hold together the possibility of a public. So this is my segue to my next section, right? So this idea that libraries are actually enable the communities to be together and define the community as a public space or as public actors. Okay. If this was a class, I'll be like, any questions? But let's move forward. Okay. So the next assertion here, so panghawakan natin yung point na yon. Okay, sir, believe na kami, libraries as infrastructures. Okay yan. Diba? Parang, kung may budget pala si city, or may budget pala si department, or may budget si university, will basically say, may infrastructure budget kayo for this year, kasama po yung library kasi infrastructure din po kami. Right? Which is one rhetorical argument that we're making, right? Hindi lang siya publicity stunt, right? Hindi lang siya feel-good philanthropic activity, right? It is an actual infrastructure investment. Is one key thing. Specifically, I argue that libraries are civic infrastructures, which then asks the question, what does it mean to serve the public today, right? And I think I'm making this assertion because more and more in a society that is, what do you call this? We're seeing a public that is more fractured and more fragile, diba? We're seeing the division of our communities in terms of, one side or over the other side. It's even more reason why we need civic infrastructures, right? Alam na natin yung argument of libraries as third space, diba? Parang wala nang mapuntahan yung mga tao outside of work and home. So the libraries actually function as that particular space, right? I-add natin dito yung idea na, okay, but beyond that, what can the library as a civic infrastructure actually do in serving and building this notion of what the public is? So I offer you some ideas and or provocations. First things first, that publicness is a practice, not a category. So iniisip nyo siguro, sir, I work at a science library, or I work at a academic library, or I work at a special library in a bank. So by definition of a number of definitions, we are not a public library, right? What I'm trying to say here is that what I'm trying to assert is that publicness is a practice, not a category. Meaning that the public itself, the notion of a public, is not a fixed group that is waiting to be served. It is something that we build and sustain through our work. So may specific publics tayo na sinaserve, right? kausap ko yung mga kasamahan natin dito sa DOST kanina, ang unang tanong ko ay, so who are your end users, diba? Naka-discussion kanina dito about it, parang okay, diba? Which is also a different way of saying who is your public as a DOST library, right? And this comes in different shape or forms, right? Obviously, if you're an academic library, your main public is likely the studentry, right, or the university staff and faculty as well, right? And you can see these iterations across the board, right? But what I'm trying to assert here, or what I'm trying to relay, is the idea that while we are not quote unquote considered a public library, we should all aspire, or rather operate within this notion of publicness as a practice, right? Which means our main stance is to always be in service of that specific identified public, or rather to work with that specific public, right? So what does this mean then for us to pursue publicness as a practice? I have 3 assertions here, right? And these are, to a certain extent, not new to all librarians and information professionals, but is worth reiterating nonetheless. 1, publicness as a practice means that we protect the right to access information. That full stop. Like that is like our main thrust as a practice, right? Whatever happens, we'll always make sure that everyone would have the right to access to information. That's why libraries are generally, and librarians should generally be against any form of censorship, right? Or libraries and librarians and information services should always design towards access. Like access is always a key thing for us, right? This also means that publicness as a practice calls on us to uphold intellectual freedom. Like everyone should have the right and should have the ability to actually pursue their particular set of interests, or their pursuit of self-actualization as intellectual actors or intellectual bodies. And finally, publicness as a practice means that we should always care for the dignity of every person we serve. Every single person that we serve and not yet serving, which is, I think, as equally important. Now, when people enter our spaces, that we treat them with dignity. Balik tayo dun sa yung example ko kanina with regards to security. Like, does the idea of having that particular mechanism, does that give the dignity to a particular person or not, right? Ilan na sa atin nung undergrad tayo, makikipunta tayo sa ibang library, diba? It's parang ang dami nilang mga papel. Parang ano ba, kailangan ko pang patunayan yung sarili ko as a human being to have access to your library, right? And if you really think about it, for those who have, for example, traveled, right? Parang ano yung pinakaayaw natin mangyari, 'di ba? Parang sobrang hassle pumunta kasi nakaka-dehumanize yung pag-cross ng borders. Pag-interview sa'yo ng immigration officer dito sa Pilipinas at pagdating mo dun sa country na pupuntahan mo, 'di ba? They judge us for like, ikaw ba ay may kakayahang lumipad, or ikaw ba ay karapat-dapat na tumigil o bumisita dito sa aming bansa. If you think about it, that mechanism of policing sometimes applies to some of our libraries. Are our libraries actually welcoming spaces? And sometimes, if you really think about some of our policies and some of our practices, that might not be the case. Even for some of our public libraries, right? So the idea is that even if we're saying no to them, there's a proper way of saying no to people and handling them with dignity. And being able to explain to them why, or maybe helping them be redirected to go elsewhere, if that is actually the case. But the point here is, even if, again, you're not a public library, publicness as a practice should still be something that we should aspire for. Because to call something public is actually to make a promise. It is to say that what we do here belongs to everyone. That the knowledge we steward and the care we offer are not reserved for a few, but shared with many, right? To be able to say that I serve the public, or I am with the public, or I engage with the public is a very specific form of promise. A promise for what? I assert, for example, that It is a promise to nurture conditions where people can read, learn, rest, self-actualize, and be with community without permission or purchase. Right? Ayan. Tandaan niyo yung mga library oath, ethics, yung mga lisensyado nating kasama sa library profession, kung ano yung what were the words that you actually said when you took that particular oath, right? And that particular oath applies to whatever form of libraries that you work in. And so this is again the idea of the publicness as a practice, not just as a category. This is where why I think a lot of us who have been with libraries, right? If you try to create a typology of like why people enjoy being in libraries, often these are things that they would say, right? This is a place for them to read, right? Or this is the obvious one. This is a place for them to learn, diba? Through those books and with other people. It's a place for them to rest, to find respite regard the outside of the spaces of the work and the home. And I actually think this is the library can be a space for self-actualization, where they discover who they are, what they want to do, who they want to be, right? And have access to that information that enables them to do that. And the key thing here is that it should enable them to do all of those without permission or purchase. So, as we go through these two particular ideas of publicness as a practice and the public as a promise, then we start asking questions such as, do our policies welcome or exclude? Do our programs reflect our community's realities or only their aspirations? Do our spaces communicate safety and belonging? Public service is not a slogan to display during celebrations, such as what we're doing this month. It is an ethic to inhabit every day, right? So that means that we should be reclaiming the civic dimension of our work. That means asking what kind of public our libraries help create. I think this is the key term here. Often and as I've mentioned, we often look at public as a thing that we serve, but actually a part of being part of the civic dimension, or being part of the civic space, is that libraries themselves specifically shape and create the very public that we aim to serve. That means we have to actively ask ourselves, anong klaseng, in this case, if you're an academic library, what kind of students do we actually want to create? Or in the case of DOST, for example, what kind of scientists do the library enable to shape, right? If you're a public library, what kind of pasigenyo is a word? No. What kind of pasigenyo do we want to actually create, to shape through the library? If we actually take a beat and ask us that question, I think it will lead us to very generative directions, right? So hindi lang yung parang sinong isa-serve natin. It's also a question of like, what kind of people do we create? What kind of public do we create? I don't have those answers. I ask the libraries to actually reflect on that as well. And the reflection of those, hindi lang si librarian yung makakaisip, right? To be able to reach answers to these questions means actually being with the very community and the very public that we're aiming to shape and reshape. I'm going to take a sip of water here. Okay. So I teach LIS 195 or sa UP Dalaman. This is information ethics. So it's a newish course. I think 2018 siya introduced. So when I got back to teaching a year ago, it's one of the courses that I was very keen on teaching, right? So yung information ethics, we teach it at the end, usually at your 4th year, just before you graduate. So this means that after 3-4 years, you go through all the things you need to learn as a librarian, right? Collection management, cataloging, indexing, the different IT courses, the things that are basically going to be asked in your licensure exam, right? So then the question is, when we were developing this curriculum, this course, the curriculum change and the course itself for 2018 is that why do we need an information ethics class, right? And the idea here is that after all of our students have learned the technicalities of the work, gusto namin yung 195 as a pabaon, so to speak, right? For our students, not only to have the technical skill sets, but also to be able to reflect on two questions, which is, why do we do the things that we do, and why do we do the things the way we do them? Fundamentally, that's the main thrust of that class, right? So unlike the other LIS classes that really revolves around, the technicalities of the work, the information ethics class is supposed to be a mechanism that will lead the students to revisit basically everything that they've studied and actually ask those questions. Why are we cataloging in the first place, and why are we doing cataloging the way we are doing them? Diba? Why are we doing collection management, and why are we doing collection management the way that we're doing them? And through the course of that particular class, we help or shepherd our students through these ethical exercises or ethical thinking, right? The class itself is not meant to be prescriptive. We don't tell our students what to do, diba? The goal of the class is, by the end of that class, you should have the critical faculties to think through these things, right? To be able to identify those standards, evaluate those standards, and see if those standards work or not, right? Or the decisions that we are making within our set of libraries. And at the very top of my syllabus for LIS 195 is this quote by Ruha Benjamin from her book Viral Justice: How We Grow the World We Want. Right? It's an amazing book that talks about technology and how technology is shaping the world the way it is shaping it today. And Benjamin in the book says, remember to imagine, and this is Benjamin's call to action, that Benjamin states, remember to imagine and craft worlds you cannot live without, just as you dismantle the worlds you cannot live within. And the information ethics class, and to a certain extent, our existence in the profession, is an invitation or a demand to do just that, right? It's not just about creating the things we want to create, but it's also about dismantling the things that needs to be dismantled. So yun yung connection niya sa infrastructure, right? Infrastructure means that what kind of infrastructure do we want to build? And what kind of existing infrastructure do we actually could go without, or could reinvent, or destroy altogether? Because again, not all infrastructures are serving us the way it should be serving us. So that's the idea here of Benjamin, which I'll go back to later on. So where does this go, right? So we believe that libraries are infrastructure, and specifically in this case, a civic infrastructure. What then is the next step? And so I think if we would want to reimagine our libraries as infrastructures that we cannot live without, and also to dismantle parts of our libraries that our public cannot live within, I would say that actual move and that actual action is radical in its inherentness. Okay, so likely when you saw this particular title for this topic and you said, ay, radical. Ay, taga-UP si sir. Ano sasabihin niyo nito? Diba? I offer a number of provocations for us to consider and reflect on, right? And the first thing is that for us to actually understand the pun intended, the root of what the term radical means, right? So etymologically speaking, it comes from the word radix or radicalis, which literally means root, or of, or relating to, or having a root, right? To be radical or to pursue radicalness or radicalism means that we need to return to the fundamentals and to the basics, right? And the idea here is because while most people perceive radicalism as to like the complete uprooting, which is in itself is actually the point, is the complete uprooting of our current systems, what the radical is actually saying is that we have gone so far off from our roots that we actually need to return back to it, right? More on that later on. Or the other way of looking at radicalism or radical actions is to look at how can we actually identify the root of an issue and actually stay in that and use that in trying to reconstruct or reimagine or dismantle sometimes our infrastructures, or in this case, our libraries as infrastructures. So that's the idea. To be radical is to go to the root. When we return to the roots of librarianship, we find a profession grounded in the belief that access to knowledge is a public right and is not a privilege. That belief, simple as it sounds, is radical. So I'm going to offer, within the next couple of minutes, some provocations, because that is the radical tradition, right? Is to give you some provocations that hopefully as you see these provocations, you'll be like, that sounds radical, but also that sounds nothing new. And if that is the idea, then the point of what radical is makes sense, right? So let's go through them one by one. One, access to knowledge is a public right. This should be something that we all agree on, right? Like, great. So yeah, we agree on the idea that access to knowledge is a public right. I think we can see here that there are moments in our history, and I, together with my colleagues, Professor Ira Benrostro-Kabab and Professor Kathleen Obille, just finished writing a book chapter on the history of censorship in the Philippines and how libraries have actually both enacted and resisted censorship. And we call it like the colors of censorship, right? And there's very specific colors, black, red, and white, that we actually trace. And throughout history, librarians have both become like at the forefront of resistance, but at the same time, sometimes the very mechanism of these censorships actions as well. And so that means that if we genuinely believe that access to knowledge is a public right, that as librarians, we will go against any form of banning books, that we will go against any form of restricting access to information, whatever that information might be. And it is absolute, right? And while going against censorship is a seemingly systemic radical action, there are also very simple things that we do day in, day out that espouses this idea. For example, when a librarian refuses to discriminate users, that is a radical action that believes that access to knowledge is a public right, right? So if, for example, within our libraries we say we don't discriminate, then it's like, oh, okay, you're already being quote-unquote radical, right? But if you're actually looking at certain actions that does discriminate, then perhaps you're actually not aligned with this entire idea or this entire premise of it being a public right, right? When a student is treated with respect rather than suspicion, I always find this interesting when I go to libraries, and this is both parang a traumatic experience for me, which a lot of undergrads experience. Diba? Parang, why do we sometimes go to libraries and the first thing that we feel is that I don't think the library trusts me? We have all experienced this at one form or another. But parang burden ako dito sa library. Right? But kailangan pang patunayan na ano yan, legit researcher ka? Right? And people can argue on why this is the case and why there are mechanisms, so on and so forth. But I think the point being here is that if we believe that indeed access to knowledge is a public right, there would be certain actions that we're doing that is so simple that it is radical in its simplicity, right? Sometimes we defend it by saying, sir, yun po yung polisiya. Posible ba nating tingnan yung polisiya natin kung bakit siya ganun in the first place? Is there a way that we can actually revision these things and rewrite these policies as we see fit, right? Similar to when the patron's need for warmth is met with understanding rather than judgment. So these are everyday small acts that we do that that believes and grounds this idea that access to knowledge is a public right. This also means that not only going against censorship, but also going against any corporate or capitalist logics, right? So the idea of a library as a public right means that people should have access to information for free or at the very least at cost, right? When libraries start charging people, I think they start losing the point of what a library does, right? Just to be clear, any public good is not meant to earn. Is it at cost at the institution that is providing that service? We are not in the business, we are not in the capitalist business of earning money. That is not the point of libraries as public infrastructures. So that means na parang if a particular person needs to access to the library, sure, we can make certain computations na parang this is at cost and charge them a certain minimal amount. That's perfectly fine, right? The slightly more radical action is to say it's free, because it should cost the library money to provide services, right? It should cost the library money to provide services. We shouldn't be in the business of actually earning things, because once we start thinking through the mechanisms of earnings, right? Then we start looking at capitalist and corporate logics. Eh, yun nga yung, that's the main thrust of what the library is going against, right? So this goes with the idea of fines, for example. Let's just revisit some of these things that we are doing and saying, why is this here in the first place? And what are we trying to actually veer away from? Next, privacy is a condition of freedom. So while we all agree that access to knowledge is a public right, libraries should always defend the right to read, search, and think without surveillance. This is also like a very scary thing that we're seeing now in a lot of our libraries are around the world, but also locally here in the Philippines. Na parang the libraries has suddenly became a space for surveillance. And often we justify this as mechanisms of security, right? But how do we feel when we enter certain spaces that it seems that the entire design of it is meant to tell us that we distrust certain actors and therefore we're going to put these mechanisms to keep an eye on all of them? The library should always be a space where curiosity should be unmonitored, right? Where people are enabled to look at any book that they would want to look at without fear that they'll be judged, right? Or fear that people will know what they're looking at. People should be able to go in and out of these spaces knowing that, quote-unquote, their secret is safe with the library, and that secret will never be given to anyone, right? If yung first provocation is a move against corporate and capitalist logics, this one is against policing and surveillance as a mechanism, right? The library is not a security space. The library should always operate as an open space that people could be and do what they want, right? The library should build on trust with its end users, not distrust. And so once we start looking at these things and look at our policies, parang, does this actually signal this notion of trust, or is it signaling that we don't trust our users? And a big part of that is believing and giving them the privacy that they deserve. Which then leads to the third provocation, which is care is a professional ethic. To treat users not merely as customers, but as members of a shared public is a radical reorientation towards service grounded in empathy, dignity, and hospitality. There are a number of stereotypes that we're trying to break, right? Na parang, oh, the librarians who shushes everyone or polices everyone. I think we're starting to see an emergence of an image of a librarian that is very different from that. a librarian who actually presents themselves primarily as care workers that shows empathy, that upholds dignity, and actually ensures hospitality within their particular spaces, right? I think in our classes, for example, when we have like an LIS class on access, right? So these mechanisms, kasi maraming technical classes that we take, or the students take, that they'll be able to function within the library. But I actually think that we need more classes that teaches our students to be care workers, that teaches our students to actually how to handle their end users, how to be with community, right? To understand them, to listen to them, to walk with them, to get their trust and to get their support. Again, this is part of it is against the notion of policing. So if this, we're against capitalist logics. Here, we're against surveillance. Here, we're against policing, which is a mechanism of like, why are we doing fines in the first place, right? It's like, I like, every time a library still has fines, I'll be like, why? Like, you have to genuinely sit down with me and justify why you're doing it. Sir, it's at cost, or sir, it's at, like, if you really think through it, I think the end goal, or hopefully the conclusion is going to be the same. Fines is not useful institutionally. Like, it's not even going to cover the book, right? But sometimes what I think about it is, actually, kung yung libro yun napunta sa isang tao, tas nasa kanya na yan, the library has made an impact because you provided a book to a person. And if other people wants to borrow that book that does not exist because someone got it, you know what kind of book you're going to buy, right? And so I think that's like a key thing that would be important in these particular set of ideas. Okay, next is this idea that library work and information service is labor, right? A lot of people think, oh, you know, I want to be a librarian and do this and do that, right? So I think one of the key things I want to stress here is that if we believe that library work and information service are labor, not volunteerism, not vocation alone, and not invisible care work that can be endlessly stretched, that means we need to honor the truth. If we are to honor this truth, that library work is labor, then that means we need to pay people fairly. We need to pay our librarians the right amount of money to have a living wage. That seems to be a very simple ask, but a thing that we don't have, right? So it's hard to ask our librarians to perform the duties that they need to perform, to be with other people, to perform the care work they need to do, that the communities requires and demands. That means we also need to pay people fairly. That also means creating just working conditions. If you're managing a library, if all your library staff hates you, there's something probably wrong in how you're doing certain things, right? Because one of our key responsibilities in running the library is to make sure that the people who runs it and who are part of the library are happy with the working conditions that they have. This also means that we should recognize the contributions of interns and student assistants. For the love of God, let's pay our interns some form of remuneration, right? So Congressman Chel Jokno, for example, is fighting for that bill that actually requires our interns and our student assistants to do that. Specifically, our BLIS students who actually have the prerequisite skill sets to operate our libraries. And they need, it sounds radical, but it's also such a basic thing for us to actually do, right? Sir, wala pong budget yung institution namin. Demand. Have you even asked? Did we even ask to make these provisions? And maybe that would be a good thing that there is a law so that no one can actually say no, because it is now mandated by law to actually do that, right? But this also means valuing our paraprofessionals, right? Meaning that not creating some form of hierarchy on who is a licensed professional and who is not, right? Everyone who works in the library enables the library to function, and therefore they should all be treated with a certain level of dignity. Because how can we treat our end users with dignity if we don't treat each other within our libraries and information services specifically with that as well? Which also means that we need to protect the right to organize if you are able to unionize, right? Because if we believe that library work is labor, the only way that we can have better working dynamics and working relations is to organize, is to form unions, to demand better work environments for us. Actually gonna try to finish this before the 10-minute break, if this is fine. Okay. So then that leads us to this idea that a profession is something we profess to, not a boundary we defend. What does this mean? I think sometimes the profession is turning it inwards a lot. That because of certain notions of whether it's insecurity of the profession itself, right, that it aims to protect its boundaries rather than its purpose. What do I mean by this, right? So a lot of discussion in the profession sometimes focuses on advancement, certification, reputation. We all know this if you're in the library. You all know this as being part of the library profession, right? How do we get certified? How do we go up the ranks? How do we ensure that our profession is respected or get remunerated the way it should be remunerated? I agree with this whole idea and these whole actions of professionalization. They are indeed important. But I also warn the community that this could also become a form of gatekeeping, right? A way of guarding status instead of opening doors. When we define our profession by the professionals rather than by its end users or the public, I think we might miss the mark. So to live up to the radical roots of librarianship, we need to remember what we are professing to. To be a profession, after all, using the root word, is to profess. What do we profess to? And we don't profess towards our own self-development. We profess towards our service to the public. Our work gains legitimacy not from titles or associations or certifications or CPD points, but from how faithfully we serve. The measure of a profession's success is not how it advances itself, but how it advances the public it purports to serve, right? When, for example, we have our annual reports, I'll be more interested to be able to see how many users have we actually served, how many communities have we actually reached out to. Metrics such as customer satisfaction is one thing, might be useful for certain actors, but my point being is that, you know, the success of our libraries should be dependent on, did we do our job? And therefore, what is that job? As civic infrastructures. That's the whole goal of what I'm trying to assess, right? There needs to be a reckoning of how we see our profession, not inwards, but to see our profession outwards, is my call. Which then leads to this idea of stewardship over ownership, right? If libraries model a commons, they teach that knowledge gains value when shared, not hoarded. In an age of intellectual property and paywalls, stewardship is a radical alternative to possession. We should be at the forefront of making sure that paywalls do not exist. We should be in the forefront of making sure subscription to certain things go down. We should be at the forefront of ensuring that local scholarship gets circulated and distributed wherever they might actually be needed. And I think this is actually a key thing that the profession needs to focus more on. Is this idea of a commons, the libraries as a commons. Then we go against this notion of gatekeeping. Because if we believe, almost there with this end, community over standards. Like, I think sometimes our libraries and our profession is preoccupied with ideas of like internationalization, quality assurance, right? All in good and all valid, right? Like everyone wants to be ISO certified or get approved for some quality assurance elsewhere. But I think the question there is that whose standards are we actually meeting? And whose standards are we actually satisfying? If we believe that ours is indeed a civic infrastructure, then the question will always be, are our communities happy with the work that we are doing? And I think that is a more successful mechanism to see how good we are and give us an idea of where we're going. Which then leads us to the final point of these provocations before we go on a 10-minute break, which is neutrality is neither possible nor desirable. So some librarians, and by extension other information professionals, think that their main goal is to be neutral agents. The problem with neutrality is that often it protects existing hierarchies, right? To be neutral is to enable existing hierarchies to exist, to enable existing power structures to develop, right? So the radical librarian understands that to serve the public fairly sometimes means taking a principled stand for inclusion, for truth, or for the right to know. This means being with the community and where the community wants to go and demanding that for them and with them as well. And so as we take a quick break for the next 10 minutes, I'm now trying to put together those three words of radical civic infrastructures. That's the whole provocation and idea here, right? That we consider these libraries as radical civic infrastructures. They are infrastructures because they hold up the everyday life of the communities that we serve, enabling learning, access, and belonging. They are civic because they serve the public good, not private interest, and make equality tangible in ordinary ways. And they are radical because they persist in doing so even when the world moves in the opposite direction. When knowledge is commodified, when care is undervalued, when labor is made invisible. The only response and the only proper response is a radical one. So to call libraries radical civic infrastructures is to recognize that they are not neutral containers, but active forces for, big word, justice. They remind us that democracy depends on maintenance, that public service is a form of courage, and that care, though quiet, is never passive. As we take a quick break, the last section of this particular talk will talk about, okay, sir, so what exactly can we do to return to and strengthen our libraries as radical civic infrastructures? And we'll take a 10-minute break.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Ayan po. Thank you very much, Dr. Olgado, for the first part po, no, ng kanyang presentation. So, maganda, no, na ibahagi sa atin ni Prof. Olgado na libraries talaga are never neutral. Ayan, kasi na-build siya upon the existing systems, no, na hindi rin naman natin sure na neutral or political na po ba talaga, ay diba? Tapos, being radical, nabanggit nga ni Prof. Bono kanina na it's returning back, no? Going back to the roots. Kaya dun sa mga systems, kung saan na-build yung libraries natin, pwede nating tingnan kung ano ba yung problems sa policy, sa design, and from there, demand for action, call to action po tayo. Tama, di ba, Ms. Chay?
Yes. Kaya nga after nitong hybrid seminar natin, may anti-reflection.
Ayan, tama. Sa dami ng nasabi at na-share na insight sa atin ni Prof. Bono, I'm sure marami talaga tayong reflection, lalo na from our participants.
Hindi pwede maging invisible.
Yes, Ms. Chay, hindi pwede maging invisible sa library, lalong
Pero hindi dahil nag-breakdown.
Yes, Ms. Chay.
Nagsira yung flood control, no? So, ikaw, Miss Jam, nung nag-aaral ka pa, you visit your library, di ba?
Unfortunately, Ms. Chay, during my high school days, limited po ang space ng aming library noon. So, hindi ko po siya madalas napupuntahan, pero it was a space for writing, for journalism, for doing the trainings po namin ng
Hindi
high
naman siya
school.
totally invisible.
Not totally invisible, Miss Chai.
Pero nung college, active yung library.
Yes, Miss Chai, napakarami. Actually, culture shock ako nung nag-college po ako. Dahil napakarami po palang libraries, specifically college libraries po sa aming university. And from there, na-immersed po ako sa kung ano ba ang library, ano ang ginagawa nila, at ano-ano yung ibang services na may i-offer sa atin ng library.
Yes. Okay, so I hope na nakarelate yung ating mga audience sa na-experience mo, Miss Jam. Kasi meron iba siguro na nare-realize nila ngayon after hearing this na, ay, invisible pala yung library namin. Saan na kaya napunta yung miscellaneous fee, library fee natin, di ba? So, check natin yung library natin, guys. Huwag natin ipa-invisible. How about yung mga on-site audience natin? Ano yung mga relate experience nyo with your library na na-mention ni Doc Bono? Meron ba dito? Wala. Okay, ayaw nila. Sige. So, for now, let's have a shout out sa ating mga Facebook Live audience. So, meron tayo from UPBGC College of Law Library, si Ma'am Ning Samson Roliano. So, thank you for watching, ma'am. We have from SDO Tapat Upper Bikutan National High School as well, si Ma'am Bendiola. We have also from MSU Maguindanao College of Law.
We also have from INATS or INATS Bagumbayan Annex Tuwao West Cagayan from Miss Alma Guerrero. Good morning daw po.
We also have viewer from the Division Library Hub, Division of Cagayan de Oro City, Bulua National High School.
Also watching from the city of Santo Tomas, Batangas.
We have viewers from Bukidnon as well, Miss Jam.
Ayan, ang layo na narating ng ating hybrid seminar. Miss Chai? Napakarami
Yes.
rin nating mga comments pa here.
Okay. So, after the break, Prof. Bono will continue with his presentation.
Yes.
And after that, we will have a Q&A. So, if you have your questions, please leave it on the comments sa ating Facebook Live. And later on, mag-open tayo for the floor for the Q&A.
Yes. So, Miss Chai, what time exactly tayo babalik after the break? Around 10:40. 10:40 a.m. po tayo babalik. So, we only have 4 minutes. So, kung magsi-CR kayo, CR na po tayo. Magkaroon na po tayong CR break. If you want coffee, magtimpla na po kayo. Ayan, dito po sa
Yes, we
on-site
have
participants.
coffee po dito
meron po
sa
tayong
on-site and water
coffee.
dispenser po sa may likod.
Yes, ayan. Wala. Ayan, Miss Chai, may question tayo sa comment. May question po tayo sa comment, they're asking, may eval form na po ba? So, ang ating evaluation form po ay ifa-flash sa ating screen bago po tayo mag-end later.
Right? And madami pa nagpapa-shoutout dito, Miss Jam. So, basahin natin. We have from Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament. We also have viewer from St. Teresa College of Tandang Incorporated. Good morning po. We also have from Cavite State College Library, Cavite State University Library Services.
Pa-shoutout din po ang Davao Doctors College Library. We also have viewers from Bohol Provincial Library and Information HNU Learning Resource Center. Hello also from Paulo Nicole, watching from School of St. Anthony Library, Lagro, QC.
We also have viewer from Marawi City.
Miss Chai, napakalaya na talaga ng narating, ano? Good morning also from John Buco, Colegio de Jimenez Incorporated from Jimenez Misamis Occidental.
Yes, and we also have viewer from SDO Isabela City, Basilan Province. And we have here from General Santos City as well. Hello po to all of our viewers.
Shout out daw po, no, ang ating on-site participant, Miss Giselle, ang ating SRS1 from ISS or Information Services Section. Andito po si Sir Nat, also an SRS2 from ISS
as
also.
well.
Ayan ang ating mga, and also another from
Sir Eman.
ISS, Sir Eman. Ayan po ang ating mga masisigasig na staff sa Starbucks.
One minute to go.
Good morning daw po from Miss Gloria Pangat Lumbera. Good morning also from Miss Danette Marie Marco.
And we also have viewing from La Salle University, Osamis City. Alright, so it's already been 10 minutes.
Ayan, Miss Chai, no, 10:40 na po. So now,
we're going to welcome again Doc Bono to continue his presentation.
Ayan. Online na, okay na ba tayo ulit? Okay na. Okay. Sorry, napasarap yung chismisa namin dito about yung implications ng pinagdi-discuss namin. Natin so far here, right? Na parang without going into details, it's like sometimes you already have the mechanisms, you already have the technology, you already have the infrastructure, but really it's the policies and the practices that hinders your institution to do what it needs to do, the more radical aspects of it. And sometimes it's actually the policies that are hard to dismantle more than the technologies. Kasi paminsan, game na diba? Parang game na yung mga librarians, game na din yung technology, tas biglang it's and sometimes if we actually look at it, most of our policies are also still dependent on previous policies, diba? Parang yung isang pinaka pain point dyan sometimes is that there are policies that exist that are based on like the analog world, diba? Parang ito yung mga polisiya na it makes sense in the analog world, but it doesn't make sense in the digital world. But the point being is that so far we've made an argument in terms of looking at our libraries as radical civic infrastructures. So this next part, which is a considerably shorter part, is a call to action, so to speak, on what can we actually do, the small things we can do to return to and strengthen this whole notion of libraries as radical civic infrastructures, right? So we're not thinking of like large systemic change. We're not thinking of like, dismantling things altogether. There are certain things that we're going to dismantle. But the point is that how can we actually move forward with the quiet, small things? One of the favorite quotes that I hold on to over the last couple of years, diba? Kasi parang more and more it feels like the world is burning, and it is literally burning, or getting, well, anyways. sometimes the best thing we can do is to keep our little corner sane, right? There might not be certain things that we can change with, society writ large, but sometimes the most radical thing that we can do is keep our own little corner sane. And so that means if we are a librarian or an information professional, how do we make sure that that little corner of the world is doing what it's supposed to be doing, right? So I offer three main actions, so to speak. First is to listen and pay attention to the communities we serve, and that also means to tune down the noise coming elsewhere. This seems like a very basic thing, right? Like we always make decisions based on our communities or our users as well. I'll give you some examples to illustrate this quiet radicalism, which we're seeing these changes in a number of our libraries across the country and across the globe as well, right? So if we say that we pay attention to the communities we serve, for example, if you're a library and then you realize that our users actually end up going to the library and then they end up sleeping, right? So if you're a librarian, there are numerous ways that you can react to this, right? Sometimes our librarians will be like, no, the library is not a place to sleep. And therefore, you'll go to the user and then tap them on their back and say, oy, bawal matulog dito sa library, right? But if we actually pay attention to our communities, a good librarian would actually be thinking, okay, our end users are tired and exhausted. There's nothing that you can do as a librarian to change that, right? I mean, if these are students, hindi mo naman pwedeng kausapin yung university na, uy, baka naman pwede yung, gaanan yung mga requirements ng mga estudyante. You can't do that, right? Like, you can try, but that is outside of your purview, so to speak. But what you can do is acknowledge that particular practice of those end users and those students. The mere fact that our students go to our library and find the library to be a safe space enough to find comfort and to take a rest amidst a very difficult, not only their life within the school, but their life outside of it, right? Mga working students natin, for example. And then they need a space between their work and then their schooling, and they just need like 30 minutes or maybe an hour just to take a rest. Because after that, they still have to go do their work, and they still have to do their schoolwork as well. And so we're seeing now libraries acknowledge this particular practice, acknowledge this particular use, and being able to redesign their spaces and say, what if we actually introduce a beanbag? What if we actually introduce some lounge spaces so that our students who go to our library to sleep can sleep more comfortably? Kasi kung nakaganon lang sila sa table, their neck will hurt, their back will hurt, they won't get the proper rest that they need, right? And while we don't initially thought of our libraries as spaces where people can rest, then we acknowledge that our users are actually telling us something. Our users are telling us that they see the library as a space to rest because they feel that it is safe. And so a librarian who then pays attention to this will then make certain changes to actually make this possible. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to turn the library into a hotel, right? But it's just making those little design choices that actually enables people to do just that. And it doesn't cost a lot to make those particular changes, right? Or for example, when we realize that, we have more and more students who are actually going to the library and using it as a social space for group work, diba? Mga 30 years ago, we would not have thought of the library as like a place where groups will come together and work. But suddenly you realize na, okay, if our students are actually doing that to do specifically that, then maybe we can redesign our library to actually help them for those specific end use cases, right? I think if we go back to the image that I've shown at the very beginning, right? Dun sa infrastructure, dun sa roads. Makikita natin na, okay, I'm gonna very quickly go back to that image to actually show us that. If we look at this particular image, we can see that the users are telling us something already. That the users are telling us that the current design of the roads, the current design of the infrastructure is not serving them well. It is not serving them well, so much so that they are creating a different path for them to take. And so now, because we know that this path exists, our natural reaction should be, okay, so what should we do with this path, right? Sasementohan ba natin? Maglalagay ba tayo ng parang pebbles? Kasi mahal yung semento. So lagyan lang natin ng mga, at the very least, like mga bato, diba? Para pag umulan, it should still be safe for them, right? So this is what it means by actually paying attention to our communities. Our communities are actually telling us something. Sometimes papasurvey ka, but sometimes they feel like they can't tell you. And so the best thing to do is actually pay attention to their actions, right? They're eating at the library, right? Why are they eating at the library? It may actually tell you na parang they can't find any other safe space to actually be able to eat. So can we actually then maybe not have those particular rules? Tanong mo, sir, may problema po kasi pag kumakain, pests, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Is there a way that you can actually separate that? Or maybe we can trust our end users to clean as they go, to eat properly, right? So I think these are mechanisms that if we pay attention to the behavior of our communities, that will actually lead us to changes that would be beneficial for them, because that's inherently what we're trying to do. Because for example, if your goal is like, sir, may problema po kasi with, it might damage the books. Okay, but who are the books for? The books are for the people. The people are telling you what they need, right? So it shouldn't be an actual radical position to say, this is what the users are telling us and we're going to follow suit accordingly. And that means to pay attention to specifically that. And that also means to turn down the volume of noise, right? When we're, sometimes kasi, we look at like standards or practices or like best stuff from like a neighboring library. Oh, may benchmarking tayo. Like, diba, oh, library, oh, magbe-benchmark tayo at another library. And my goal is always like, okay, sure, you can benchmark, but maybe not the first thing you should do is benchmark. Maybe the first thing you should do is actually engage with your community and ask what they need. And if they're not telling you, just pay attention to the behaviors that they're actually doing. Right. We're seeing this as well in terms of like ISO standards or quality assurances, right? And sometimes these standards are actually set by international bodies. And those international bodies are framing these standards based on certain end users that they have. So makikita mo, yung standards na ginagawa nila is not necessarily pegged to the needs of our local communities. I'm not saying that we should go away with international standards. I'm saying that we should give attention to, at the very least, an equal amount to what these standards are telling us and also what the communities are begging for us to actually pay attention to, right? I remember being at the library once, and I was having these conversations, and I was looking at, they were very, very proud about, I'm not going into details, but they're very proud about X, Y, and Z, right? Okay, that's great. And then when I asked the actual end users of the library, I asked them, what do you like about the library? And they said ABC. So there's actually a mismatch between what the library is perceiving as a as success and what the community is saying as a success. The community is not even criticizing the library. What the library fails to see is what the end users are actually valuing, right? I think that is, it shouldn't be radical to actually like be driven by user needs. It really shouldn't be radical. But we're seeing this, sadly, because of this move towards standardization, internationalization, we might be missing some of these key points. Because if there is a standard that we should address, it's the standard set by our communities. Which means that we should revisit our policies and practices. Dismantle those that do not serve, our radical commitments. Our radical commitments are the ones that I've, the series of provocations I shared with you. So little things, katulad nga ng sabi ko, our fines, our use, our access policies, right? Our operating hours, our treatment of our paraprofessionals, how we seek assistance from our student assistantship. I'm not going to go into the details of them. This is because I don't want to be prescriptive, except for just really inviting everyone to revisit these policies and practices. And really, while it's not the intent to like dismantle these practices, at least like understand paano nga ba siya, saan siya nanggaling? Saan nanggaling tong polisiya na to? At ano yung rationale ng polisiya na to? Diba? Paminsan din kasi we think we want to change certain policies, right? Which is valid. But for me, before we ask to change those policies, we have to convince the higher ups and tell them where these policies are coming from. Diba? Hindi lang pwede na sabihin mo, boss, pwede po ba natin baguhin yung X? We need to be able to justify why bakit natin babaguhin yung X. And one way of doing it is to say, sir, kasi yung policy X po na to, ito po yung reason niya dati. Dito po siya nanggaling. Hindi na po siya valid ngayon. And then propose something. So proposal for change is always acknowledging the existing one as much as proposing a new one. And they need to go hand in hand all the time. Because going back to the discussion, the idea kanina, we need to imagine what we want, but also dismantle the things that we don't need, right? Which then leads us to the final point, which is, or rather, final call for radical actions, which is return our libraries to the public. That is, that civic engagement goes beyond the walls of our libraries. I'll tell you a couple of works that are being done by my students. So I as most LIS faculty does, we advise students who do undergraduate research, right? And I've been with UPS LIS for more than a decade now, and we're seeing a beautiful change in terms of the kind of thesis our students create, right? So if you ask me, so maybe like 10 years ago, most of the thesis will be talking about the same set of like genre of thesis, right? Parang disaster management or disaster planning for XYZ library. Or you'll see things like collection management evaluation, all right? Or like evaluating appraisal, whatever, blah blah blah. It's maybe it's the same thing, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But what I'm pointing out is a number of theses, maybe a decade ago, really focuses on evaluating certain functions of a library. All in good. But what we're seeing now is the emergence of LIS students who are actually seeing beyond the walls of the libraries, or looking really at this notion of libraries as a public good. So, for example, right now I'm advising, I'm advising a number of theses, but there's particular two that I think best exemplifies this idea, right? So Sanya Regala, for example, is doing her thesis on the Read Your Way Out program. So the Read Your Way Out program is a joint initiative by the National Library of the Philippines and the BJMP, the Bureau for Jail Management, something P. The idea of the Read Your Way Out program is that they're creating jail libraries with the intent of creating these opportunities for persons deprived of liberty to have the access to information and books while they are deprived of liberty, right? With the goal of hopefully reducing their sentences through reading and learning, and more importantly, to assist them in reintegration into society, right? And often when we think of libraries, throughout this talk, right, we always talk about students, the general public. We often don't think about populations that also deserve, if not even more so, need the services that our library provides. So in this particular thesis, Sanya is attempting to see how really the experiences of people who go through this particular program, right? Their experience of reading, the experience of being engaged with these, with the Read Your Way Out program, and to see if it's really transforming them, and helping them reintegrate into society as they free themselves and gain back their liberties. Another thesis is done by Jam Pangkoga, who is currently doing research on the information practices or the information behavior of the formerly internally displaced persons in Marawi following the 2017 crisis. So in Pangkoga's research, they're particularly interested to see the experience of what happens to the people before displacement, during displacement, and right now at the point of settlement. Like, where are they actually getting information services to make certain decisions, such as where to go, where to settle, transitory-wise, and eventually in terms of settling down to a new place after being displaced by the siege, right? And these two particular examples of I would say, very moving and groundbreaking thesis, it makes an argument about really the role of libraries and information services, specifically in addressing populations that are often marginalized and most at need. And this is in line with my call for like radical actions within our libraries, right? That sure, there are certain things that we need to serve within our particular set of communities, right? But if we really return our libraries to the public, then we will start really seeing what does the public and what does our community demand from our libraries. And often, sometimes these would mean that we go beyond the walls of our libraries. Right. In other countries, for example, they would have outreach librarians that for public libraries that will actively go to their communities with the unhoused, with the homeless, and telling them that, hey, the public library exists. Can I help you sign up for a library card? Samahan kita pumunta din sa library and introduce them to new spaces. So growing up, my main access to the library is through an academic library setting, obviously. I remember as a grade school student, I would spend hours at the library in Lipa, Batangas, Canosa, which is where I did my high school. And I consumed all the Bernstein Bears books. And the reason for this is because it takes a while bago ako sunduin ng service, right? And so I always associated the library, sure, with Bernstein Bears and the books, but really as that safe space that allowed me to wait, right? The library at that space that, in between, outside the classroom and waiting for my service, wherein it's really scary as a child, I found the library to be that safe space wherein both the librarians and the books were there to comfort me and help me as I wait, right? I get to escape, I get to learn things, and even that idea of the library at such a young age was a quiet, radical work that really made me fall in love with libraries. Later on in life, as I went through high school, grade school, and the rest of high school, I will always go to library, and even in college, when I went to Ateneo, I always went to the library as a safe space where, like, if I didn't know what to do, I'm just gonna go to the library. Right. At a certain point, nag-iwan ako ng gamit sa library kasi mahal yung locker. Mahal yung locker sa Ateneo. So ako, pag may PE, iwan ako yung gamit ko din sa library, which generally people would think that, no, you shouldn't be doing that. But I trusted the library so much that I feel like, alam mo, wala mo mawawala dito kung iwanan ko dito yung pagkakatiwalaan ko yung mga tao dun sa space, right? But I think for me, what really radicalized me with the possibility of a library is when I moved to New York for grad school, and I came face to face with the New York Public Library. Like, often tayo, ang perception natin with the New York Public Library next to the Library of Congress is like the mothership, right? Except they're the ones who does thing right all the time. And they do. They have this amazing collection of books and this beautiful building, beautiful infrastructure. But what really caught me is when you start looking at the little branches of the New York Public Library. When you see that these public libraries are really there for public service, right? When you're seeing the immigrants will go to these libraries to learn English, or when the unhoused will go there just to be able to, like, find refuge pag masyadong mainit or masyadong malamig sa labas. Or when someone needs access to the internet so they can apply for a job. Or when the public library provides space in the evening so that the seniors can actually meet there and they don't need to pay, rental fees to be able to find a space that they can actually find community with each other. And I think that really my experience there gave me this, not hope, but really an idea of what libraries can be and what libraries should be, right? And so I've never worked in a public library before, but I always believe and I always feel passionate about what our public libraries can be. Really more than third spaces, really as civic infrastructures that provide our citizenry the help and the support that they need, right? Civic infrastructures that do not discriminate for who they are and what they come as, right? Kahit naka-shorts lang sila, o naka-chinelas, kanyan, parang pwede pa rin pumasok sa library. Kasi binayaran naman ng tao yung taxes sa public libraries natin. Or even if you are a private institutions, diba? Parang private institution ka, tapos realize mo, wala namang gumagamit ng library. Baka pwedeng meron tayong one day a week na parang, hey, welcome community, go to the library. Wala din na mawawala, diba? Or start really looking at what the community needs, right? So, if there are times wherein like, okay, you know, mga bata kunwari, they will spend a lot of money to go into what do you call this? Computer shops to play video games. Like, is it possible for us to actually transform parts of our libraries so that the youth within our spaces won't go and pay money to play their video games, and find safety within our libraries to be able to play video games? Whether, you know, you're just providing them internet so they can play Mobile Legends on their phones, or turn certain of our programming to do that, to introduce our community to what the library has to offer. I think all this to say, and this is me reframing or rewording or borrowing from Ruha Benjamin's quote, which I shared initially, that perhaps that the main call that I'm making is this, right? Let us remember to imagine and craft libraries our public cannot live without, just as we dismantle libraries and their practices, our practices, that our communities cannot live within. And I think this summarizes my call as we see really our libraries as civic infrastructures with a very quiet radicalism that I invite us as we celebrate yet another month, yet another year of our profession and our services. I invite all of us to consider a return to this quiet radicalism and espouse and fight for libraries as civic infrastructures. Thank you so much.
Ayan, thank you so much, Prof. or Dr. Olgado, for that insightful talk. So it reminded us, that libraries are civic infrastructures, where we listen and pay attention to the communities, lalong-lalo na sa kanilang comments and suggestions. Ikaw naman, Miss Chai, ano yung sa tingin mong pinakatumatak sa iyo?
Yes, Ms. Jom, it is really enlightening to see how libraries can be such a powerful place, as well as quietly shaping communities and empowering our people. So, yung mga small changes lang na ginagawa natin sa ating library. Like for example, dati wala tayong mga beanbag sa mga library. Then ngayon may mga libraries na mayroong mga beanbags, mayroong interactive areas or social learning zones, or sa atin we have the maker space. So those changes, may impact siya to our community. And hindi lang natin siya makukuha through mga feedback form, but rather we need, as librarians or library staff, kailangan tayo mismo, we have this connection with our users talaga.
Ayan. And to build on that connection, let's ask naman, Ms. Chai, our participants. So in a POV, of a librarian, or let's say an information professional, ano kaya yung mga comments, or suggestions ng ating clients, or the public, na nai-apply na rin natin sa ating mga libraries, or kung hindi man library, other information centers. Ayan. So, meron meron po ba tayo here from on-site participants? Ano po kaya yung mga comments and suggestions from our clients or public na nai-apply na po natin sa ating library? Ayan, meron po.
Okay, habang nag-iisip sila, Miss Jam, I have here from our Facebook Live from Ma'am Geraldine Arancilio Aquino. According sa kanya, in my opinion, truth is a library's true success. Wait lang, paano ba to? Okay, gets. Ulitin ko lang po, I'm so sorry. In my opinion, truth is, a library's true success isn't measured by how perfectly it follows policy, but by how deeply it connects with its community. Standards guide us, but people give those standards meaning.
Ayan, nakakatuwa yung ganitong reflection po ng ating viewer. So talagang to connect with the community, mahalaga na ma-inform tayo, ma-ask natin sila ano ba ang kanilang needs. Ayan, and from there, improve ang ating mga facilities, ang ating systems, ang ating policies. Ayan, Miss Chai. So, ayan, at this point, Miss Chai will now open the floor for questions and reflections from our participants, both on-site and online po.
Yes. So for our online participants, just raise your hand if you have any questions. And for online participants, feel free to comment your queries on our Facebook Live. And meron na tayo ditong mga questions, Miss Jam.
Ayan, meron po tayong question here from Miss Victoria Santos. Dr. Olgado, ang question po niya, paano po natin mas mapapadali ang paggamit ng libraries bilang hub para sa community learning at public engagement?
Hello, ayun. So, tanungin po natin sila kung ano yung sa end users natin. So, usually, the way to do this is ask them, specifically your question, like, how can we make it easy for them? The other way to do it, kasi sometimes hindi nila din masasabi, is to ask them why is it, parang what makes it difficult? Kasi, often when we engage in these initiatives, we always ask about what the solution is without actually diagnosing the problem. This happens all the time. Kunyari, may initiative yung library, isipin nila, ito yung solution. And unang tanong ko lagi is that, okay, but what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And then pag na-identify nila yung problem, hindi pa rin siya tapos. Dapat itanong mo, why does the problem exist? What causes the problem? Because sometimes the solution that we create does not actually address the underlying reason for the existence of the problem. So tatlong steps siya. So we don't only ask them, how can we make this easy? We actually ask them, how is it being difficult? And what is the reason for those things that make it difficult? And then what the reason is the thing that we actually addressed, not the problem itself, or not the solution that exists in a vacuum. So for example, inisip natin na parang, technology. So introduce natin new technologies, right? Pero introduce lang natin yung new technologies without actually understanding the problem and the reason for the problem that we think the technology is addressing. So very DOST, diba? So parang we shouldn't be doing innovation for the sake of innovation. We should always, as scientists, we should always identify the problem and the reason for the problem and then solve that. So I think that scientific thinking, if you are to put it on DOST terms, is key in being able to actually address those issues. If you're a public library, whatever typology of library you have, it's still the same thing. Diagnose the problem and address that underlying thing that causes that. That is going to be specific to your institution. Though, of course, you can look at other institutions that probably have the same thing. Kasi sometimes hindi din ma-identify ng users mo directly eh, 'di ba? Parang kailangan mo din silang tulungan to see what the problem is. Yeah.
Ayan. So, ang keyword po natin dito, is always look for the root cause. Ayan. So,
Radical root.
yes,
naman.
yes, yes.
Ang galing.
I am being radical right now. Ayan, Miss Cha. For our second question naman po,
From Geraldine Arancilio Aquino, am I being radical if I don't require library cards for students to enter the library and use whatever resources the library has? What's the point when our school has less than 500 students, but I use their QR codes in their student IDs as a means for statistic of library usage? Pwede ba iyon?
Yeah, I think you're being radical because likely you're going against an existing policy, right? So likely there is a policy or a practice na parang kailangan magpakita ng ID or Form 5 yung mga estudyante every time na papasok sila ng library, 'di ba? But what you're saying is that we don't need that. And then you're being radical in the sense that ang ganda ng framing mo na parang maliit lang yung community 500, 'di ba? So it's actually very possible for a library not to know everyone but know enough people na tayo na lang dito, bakit pa tayo magpupulisan ng mga tao, 'di ba? So you can still do, as you said, keeping track for statistics, but from what I understand, we still respect privacy, so anonymized naman yung statistics. So you don't know exactly the behavior of people going in and out, pero you're looking at it from a macro level just to have those numbers actually spread. So I think you're radical because you're going against certain policies that may exist, but also you're ensuring because you're doing that in respect to the community and as a gesture that you actually trust them. Plus, di ba, parang ba't mo pa gusto ng additional na trabaho na titingnan yung IDs naman? Kasi, di ba, ang daming dahilan, ang daming reason kung bakit, di ba, parang kilala mo naman, example, kilala mo yung estudyante. Tapos wala siyang ID, hindi mo pa papapasukan yung estudyante kahit kilala mo na naman yung estudyante. But policy says that you have to. So if you're the kind of librarian who squarely follows policy without thinking through what the policy is for, then you'll just enact it, right? But to be radical is to really look at the reasons for the policies and to enact accordingly. And I think what you're doing is correct. Next step is to remove that policy altogether. Nanadong ka na eh. Alisin mo na yung policy na yun, di ba? Kung meron man.
Ayan. So I hope po nasagot ng ating research speaker ang question po na iyan. So for our next question po.
Meron po tayo question from on-site participants.
Ayan.
Hello po.
Ma'am, can you state your name po, preferred nickname, and from what institution are you from
I'm
po?
Abby po from DOST-STII. Ayan. So, may question po ako, but first, you mentioned earlier na yung sa access to knowledge is a public right. So, about this po, yung stand na to, direct or nagbibigay siya ng direct and necessary attention regarding archival restrictions. So, pagdating po doon, ayan, ito na, babasahin ko na lang. Sinulat ko kasi baka makalimutan ko. Ayan, so yung access to knowledge is a public right, stands in direct or necessary tension with the reality of archival restriction and yung complex pagdating sa pag-view ng mga records na yun or yung requirements para lang ma-view mo yung mga materials. Nagbibigay rin po ito ng conflict eh. It highlights yung core dilemma ng mga institution entrusted sa historical records na to. So, syempre, dahil nga public right siya, dapat ma-view siya ng public. Pero, on the other hand naman, meron tayong policy na kung saan kailangan natin i-protect yung privacy ng tao na nandun sa records na yun or yung policy or term set by donors or yung sa institution or legislations naman. Dahil po doon, nagli-lead siya sa maraming requirement or na kailangan para ma-view mo ng record na yan. So my question po is, when does the necessary protection of records cross the line into the unjustifiable withholding of public records or yung mga may history natin, ganon.
And so, two premises first. So the first premise is, if you're squarely a classic library, this should not be a problem, right? Because you're dealing with published materials that should generally be applicable or people should have access to. So that's a given. But in the specific example that you gave, we're moving towards archival ethics, right? And also to assert that there are certain laws and that there are certain ethical stances. I'll premise my answer by saying not everything that is legal is ethical, and not everything that is ethical is legal, right? Often, our laws are designed in such a way that are meant to institutionalize, or rather, what's the word for it? Operationalize the current set of beliefs and politics during a certain amount of time, right? Ethics are meant to actually understand those particular laws and at times question those particular laws. So that's premise number 2, right? Na parang there are very specific things that you have to legally do, which are not necessarily always aligned with what you're ethically supposed to do, right? And this becomes, sharply as you pointed out, becomes filled with tension and very blurry when we're dealing with archival materials, right? Because of a number of things that you raise, such as data privacy, for example, or agreements with the donors. With all that premise set aside, my question would then be, or my answer then would be, depends on what your institution is. For example, if you are a public institution, and like very squarely defined as a public institution, meaning that the institution runs on public people's money. As an archivist, let me reframe that. If I am working at a public institution, which is squarely funded by public money, I will always make sure that any acquisition I will take would be collections that I can actually provide access to the public. Because I don't think it is respectful to the general public if we use their taxes to preserve private collections that the public won't have access to. We are not and should not be private archives for private institutions. They want their own archive, they should build their own institution to actually create that. But if your collection enters a public institution, a public library, a university, a public university library, a department, people should have the right to access it. You can restrict it, like for example, you're not going to put it online, but people should be able to go to some form to have access to that collection, even at an analog level, so that you can actually control some of these private things. Like for example, if someone wants to access it, often what we'll do is that we'll redact certain things. Diba? Parang hindi, may mga bagay po kasi hindi natin pwedeng ma-access, pero ito po yung pwede natin ma-access. Or ikaw mismo, as an archivist, you'll say, let me see, I'm gonna try to facilitate discussing with donors. Your response should not be, bawal po. Because any response that already says bawal po is already disregarding the user that has gone through the system asking you for certain things. The least we can do is then facilitate that exchange with the donor and say, ma'am, sir, meron pong researcher na gustong gumawa nito. Ito po yung kadahilanan. And you should actually advocate for the user, not advocate for the donor, right? You shouldn't be neutral and say XYZ. You should be able to say, this user wants to do this, and I think, sir, that it would benefit the user and whatever to do that. And also, as we agreed on in our contract, we stipulated that we have to provide access to the collection. So this means that we have to actually make sure that we acquire certain things that we can actually provide access to. Otherwise, we become a private storage for someone else. And I don't think it is right that I don't think it is right that we're using people's taxes to do that. So to be more practical, that's like one key thing I did that we had issues with at when we were running the National Film Archives, now the Philippine Film Archives. I was like, I am not gonna be, or by I mean the institution, is not gonna be a private archive for a private producer. If the people, by default, are using their taxes to preserve your films, people should have access to your films in one form or another. If you say no to these agreements, then we are not inclined to take care of your film, however important it is. Because what is the virtue of preserving a film that people can't watch? There's no value to it. It's cost for the people.
Ayan, no. Key points po from Prof. Bono's answer. Not all legal are ethical and not all ethical are legal. And another one po ay, we advocate for the users, not for the donors. So, ano nga po palang magiging silbi ng ating mga pine-preserve na materials kung hindi naman po ito accessible sa ating public? Ayan. So, another question po from our FB Live, Prof. Bono. How are the public libraries in the Philippines play in being hubs for senior citizens po? Are these public libraries offer programs for seniors? Is that possible to do a drumming up of the public libraries to be hubs for seniors too? And next, I am doing a research po on this topic in Soc-Surgeon area for my master's degree. Do public libraries in other areas have programs for seniors? Thank you raw po, Prof. Bono.
Yeah, I love this question a lot. I mean, ask your local public library if they're doing it. I think seniors in particular are actively seeking these spaces, right? Because they don't work anymore, right? So often they're just at home. Ang vacuum na nagfi-fill nito is our church groups, right? So whatever your church group is. So I have a tita, for example, who found a dancing group through the church. And so they use the church's parish hall to do all of these activities, which is great, you know. But there are also certain people whose belief system, faith system is different, or don't have any belief or faith system at all. So is there a place that they can actually go that does not discriminate on any shape or form, including religious beliefs? And the library can do that. And so then we ask questions such as, what does the seniors do, right? I like the question because, like, we have a lot of programs for young people, para reading programs, diba? After school programs, diba? Parang you can go there after school, they can read certain things. Like, I wonder if we can then evaluate to design things for our seniors as well, right? At the very least, my favorite answer to this is that, you know, we are in the middle rather of, you know, a huge disinformation, misinformation ecosystem, right? And often their main targets are seniors. Our libraries, if we believe that information is key in civic life, then we should assist our seniors to actually be able to find ways to combat misinformation, disinformation. So can we have, for example, sessions teaching our more senior loved ones to identify, like, you know, AI-generated images, or, like, you know, questioning things they see on Viber or WhatsApp, right? Or God forbid, like, help them to ensure that they don't fall into, like, banking scams. Nama? Parang daming nawawalan ng pera because, you know, they give their OTP. Like, these are things as information professionals we can specifically address. One, we have to get the seniors inside their library first. That's key. Get the seniors inside their library. And then introduce these particular set of services. Lalabas na dyan yung mga infrastructure issues such as, you know, how do they get to their libraries? Like, baka naman yung library mo, parang, diba, parang hagdanan. So can the seniors actually access your library as possible PWDs or people who just have lesser mobility, right? So these things then you start thinking about as well on how to actually address that. But I like the question. As I mentioned, I'm a big fan of what the public libraries can do, but I do think that sometimes our public libraries are squarely focusing on like books, which is great. But I think really if we focus on information, if we focus on community, if information in this particular hub as a civic infrastructure, we might be able to imagine newer initiatives that they can engage with. So yeah, I wish you luck with your research, and I look forward to reading about it down the line. And I think it's a very interesting project to get into. Or the other way around it is that if it's not our public libraries, another example, maybe the public library should do extension services. So rather than asking the seniors to go to the library, maybe there is a home for the aged that the library can do some extension projects. So diba kunwari, QCPL has a roving book van. I might be making this up. But is it possible for us as a public library na parang may home for the aged dito, maglagay ka ng circulating collection doon sa senior, doon sa home for the aged, right? So rather than sila yung pupunta para mag-check out ng books, dadalhin mo yung mga books doon sa center. Or to hit two birds with one stone, right? So I'm now excited. I'm randomly imagining things. Like ano yung ginagawa natin sa mga bata? The reading, storytelling sessions. What if you bring the children to a home for the aged, or you bring an old person to the library, and then they're the ones who actually do the storytelling? You know, they get to read, so you get to actually satisfy the needs of the children, but also capacitate the seniors. Sidebar. The problem with a number of senior interventions and senior research is that we always look at seniors as people who don't have the capacity, or seniors as individuals that need help. A more progressive, if I say a more radical approach, is to actually see seniors as actual agents and actors. So in my example, you actually don't only give them services, but you tap into their abilities as well. So then imagine, cute kaya nun, di ba? Parang mga senior old people doing story time with younger folks who I would imagine would love to be around children at their old age. I think you're hitting two birds with one stone. There's a lot to imagine with public libraries, and I invite more people to do that as well.
So ayun, no, napakarami po nating mapupulot sa answer ni Prof. Bono.
Yes.
Ayan, meron po tayong next question to be read by my partner, Miss Chai. So come forward po, Miss Chai.
Thank you very much. So, I would love to see Lola Basyang na mobile library, sir, no? Napakagandang idea. Next question po, sir, we have here, it's about technology. Tagal niya mag-open. How technology can be used as a tool or empowering educational digital tool are available, their integration often fail due to inefficient training and guidance for teachers in the public schools.
Yeah, so that's a good example of what we're talking about, infrastructure on top of infrastructure. So sometimes we think technology can be deployed easily, but when we realize that there is a skill gap, then the system that you're deploying won't actually work. So then this entails two things. Either you capacitate the staff to actually learn the new technologies, or you ask the question, are there other technologies that we can use that is aligned with the skill level of the staff? Kasi sometimes pinipilit natin yung capacitating, but let's also call a spade a spade. Sometimes there's also limits to learning new things. And so there must be a mechanism that we see a middle ground, like introducing technologies that is at par with the skill level or the possibility of skill level increase of the staff that will use it. Otherwise, if you deploy the system won't work, as mentioned by the person who asked the question, because people will inherently reject the technology that they don't understand or are afraid of. So ang daming mga digitalization initiatives that fail because they don't account for the human in the system.
Ayan, thank you for that answer, Prof. Bono. Sabi nga rin po nila na dapat ang technology and the skill of the people, dapat sabay po sila. Ngayon po, if ang isa po sa kanila ay hindi, let's say po, hindi makasabay, let's find other ways. Papaano po ba natin ito magagawa ng paraan para ang ating staff ay ma-empower.
Makasabay.
Yes, makasabay. And at the same time, unti-unti, magkaroon siya ng skills, makabuild ng skills, and yes, makakapag-serve po siya sa ating clients or public.
And also, sometimes you just need to hire new staff. Just also saying this out loud. Sometimes you just need to hire new staff and lean on to the strengths of the previous staff. Like, what are they good at, right? Not everyone needs to go onboarded on new things. And sometimes the most efficient way to do it is to actually bring new people. Because sometimes the learning curve and the onboarding is so long, and then you're not assured of compliance anyways, that eventually it's going to be, in mathematical terms, it would be waste, right? So it would be more efficient to bring in some new staff. It's harsh, but sometimes that's the thing that needs to be done as well.
Yes, Prof.
po.
Bono. So we have an opinion po now from the comment section.
Yes, Doc. Since that's it, I think, for the questions. Wala na po ditong questions sa ating comment section. Wala na ding questions from our online participants. Babasahin na lang po namin yung mga opinions here from our comments. So, meron tayo dito, sabi, thank you po, Doc. Marami po akong natutunan and God bless.
Ayan. Meron pa po ba tayong mga opinion dyan para sa ating talk and Q&A portion?
Meron din po, our library warmly welcomes everyone regardless of their purpose in visiting, whether they come to read, study, research, relax, or simply explore. The library remains a safe and inclusive space for learning, creativity, and connection.
Ayan,
So,
talaga
ganda
nga
ng
namang
library nila.
napakagaganda ng reflection and opinions ng ating viewers. Ayan, Miss Chai. So, move on pa tayo?
Okay, meron pa dito mga opinions,
Meron pa
basahin
mga
natin.
opinion. Ayan, sige Miss Chai, patingin po ako. Ayan, patingin po Miss Chai. Ayan, meron po dito from Miss Grace Salas Pacho. Libraries need to adopt for these present generation's needs. Improve our policies for this modern time. Ayan po, another, thanks daw po for sharing your knowledge and expertise here with us today, Prof. Bono.
Another here po. Thank you, Doc. The role of the library is really unlimited to reach out all kinds of users, meeting their real needs.
Ayan, another po from our viewer. That's why we have different types of libraries kasi may kanya-kanyang policies and procedures with different patrons. And hindi naman po lahat daw ay applicable.
Another here is, thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise, Doc. I'm happy and learn a lot in session. Yan. So, and thank you very much, everyone, for actively participating in our Q&A session. We hope that all of the questions read and asked earlier were sufficiently answered by our resource speaker, Doc Olgado.
Ayan, we truly appreciate our resource speaker for today, for again sharing their knowledge and perspectives with us today. So we hope po that everyone learned something valuable from that talk.
At this juncture, we will now move on to the awarding of certificates. May we call Ma'am Linderleet Maglake, Supervising Science Research Specialist and Head Librarian of DOST-STII Library, to award the Certificate of Appreciation to our resource speaker. Okay, let me read the citation. Department of Science and Technology, Science and Technology Information Institute present this Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Benedict S. Olgado to share their knowledge and insights as resource speaker for the topic titled The Quiet Radicalism of Libraries as civic infrastructures at the 35th Library and Information Services Month with the theme Lace Up Libraries, a hub for cultural exploration and unity through partnership, held on 11th to 14th of November 2025 at DOST-STII Mini Theater and live stream via Facebook Live, given this 12th day of November 2025 in Bicutan, Taguig City. Signed, Dr. Napoleon K. Wanilio Jr., Assistant Secretary for Technology Transfer, Communication, and Commercialization, and Officer in Charge, Office of the Director, DOST-STII.
Ayan, once again, thank you very much, Dr. Olgado, for imparting to us your knowledge and insights on the topic, the quiet radicalism of libraries as civic infrastructure. Ayan, for our on-site and online participants naman po, you will also receive a digital copy of your certificate of participation provided that you have accomplished the evaluation form for this hybrid seminar. Ayan po, later we will flash the link after some announcements po muna.
Yes, because before we have our launch, Miss Jam, let us give you some announcement po para sa ating ongoing and upcoming activities. Tomorrow, November 13, we'll have our fourth and fifth topic. So our fourth topic is divided into two subtopics. The first subtopic will be meeting the information needs and respecting the right to informational privacy, a balancing act. This will be discussed by our resource speaker, Attorney Regine S. Tilore Gonda, Data Privacy Officer of the University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Furthermore po, the second topic is privacy by design, to be discussed by our resource speaker, Ms. Sharon Frances Tiso, Data Privacy Officer of the De La Salle University.
And in the afternoon of November 13th, we'll have our fifth topic titled Libraries as Empowerment Spaces, Advancing Gender Equality Through Knowledge Access, to be discussed by Attorney Shangri-La C. Quezon, Manager of the Operations Department of Tourism Infrastructure and Enterprise Zone Authority.
And our sixth and last hybrid seminar po will be on November 14, and our topic will be Archive, AI for Archiving and Analysis of Cultural Heritage Objects, to be discussed by our resource speaker, Professor Maricor N. Soriano of the National Institute of Physics, University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Yes, and at the last hybrid seminar, we'll have our Library Clients Appreciation Day. In the afternoon, to recognize our clients na talagang nga naman, Miss Jam, avid user ng ating library services, and to recognize those who won this year's LIS Months Contest. So sa mga sumali sa ating contest, abang-abang tayo on November 14.
Ayan, to enrich our celebration even further, we've lined up exciting learning sessions happening alongside our hybrid seminars. So our first one po, nag-kick off na po today, the workshop on Research Design Framework conducted by Mr. RJ C. Escondo, Information Systems Researcher 3 of DOST-STII. So it's a whole day workshop po, divided into two batches, focusing on strengthening research design skills. So, abang-abang po ang mga nag-research dyan.
Yes. And tomorrow, November 13, kasabay pa rin ng ating hybrid seminar. In the morning, we'll have storytelling, puppet show, and arts and craft by NLP Cuentistas, to be discussed further po in the next slide. And in the afternoon, we'll have the Felta Multimedia Incorporated to facilitate the Introduction to Robotics. So for those na interested sa robotics, you can attend this session.
Next slide, please. Ayan, let your kids discover the magic of stories and creativity with our learning session on storytelling, puppet show, and arts and crafts. Again, this will happen tomorrow, November 13, 9 a.m. to 12 noon at the DOST-STII Library Makerspace.
And in partnership with the National Library of the Philippines, this exciting session will be led by the NLP Cuentistas featuring Kuya James and Kuya Tom, our talented storytellers and puppeteers who bring tales to life and inspire young minds to read and dream.
So this session po is open to all kids and parents who love stories and creativity. So you may visit po our Facebook page and register through the QR code or registration link present on our publicity material.
And aside from our online contest, we will also be holding an online library contest titled DOST-STII Library Quest, a scavenger hunt game on November 14 from 9 a.m. to 12 noon at the DOST-STII Library Maker Space.
Ayan po, and just yesterday po, nag-close na ang ating registration form dahil all slots have already been filled. So for those participants po na gusto pang maki-join sa ating celebration, you may join by attending our hybrid seminars in our FB Live. So tuloy-tuloy po yan hanggang November 14.
Ay, hindi na ako pwede sumali, Miss Jam.
Yes,
Puno
Miss
na.
Chay. Puno na po ang ating slots.
Alright. And starting yesterday po, November 11, until our last day on November 14, open po ang ating partners, exhibit, and book fair at the DOST-STII lobby. Here, you'll have the chance to explore our partners' science and technology-related experiments, products, and services. Sino yung mga partners natin dito, Miss Jam?
So ang atin pong mga partner exhibitors for this activity are Persons with Disability Affairs Office Taguig, Book Quick Marketing, Learning is Fun, Felta Multimedia Incorporated, and Science Star Corporation.
And to sustain the excitement, we are also inviting everyone to celebrate with the whole DOST system and all its stakeholders the 2025 National Science and Technology Week on November 18 to 21, 2025 at Lawag, Ilocos Norte with the theme Building Smart and Sustainable Communities.
So tuloy-tuloy po ang advokasya ng DOST na kung saan titingnan natin ang siyensya, teknolohiya at inobasyon kaakibat sa matatag, maginhawa at panatag na kinabukasan. Kaya naman kaugnay ng selebrasyong ito, panoorin po natin itong teaser video.
Paparating na, dumadagungdong at nag-iingay. Ang kapanapanabik at kamanghamanghang 2025 National Science, Technology, and Innovation Week. November 18 to 21, 2025. Lawag City, Ilocos Norte, Philippines. Hatid ang pinakabagong teknolohiya, produkto at inisyatiba ng pinakamalaking science, technology, and innovation community. Sa temang siyensya, teknolohiya at inobasyon, kabalikat sa matatag, maginhawa at panatag na kinabukasan. Building smart and sustainable communities. Ang taunang pagdiriwang ay katatampukan ng mga natatanging SNT exhibits, SNT forums, bazaar, science quiz and contest, SNT talks, at marami pang iba na magaganap sa iba't ibang lugar sa Ilocos Norte. Para sa karagdagang impormasyon, bisitahin ang NSTW website at NSTW Facebook page.
Ayan, no? Tara po, sabay-sabay po nating puntahan. Tara po sa Ilocos Norte, Miss Chay. So, ito po, later in the afternoon session, we will have our third hybrid seminar on the topic, the role of libraries in facilitating digital cultural storytelling, to be facilitated by Mr. Brian Alger B. Cobalias, Educational Media Center Coordinator of the Ateneo de Manila
University.
University, ayan.
And ngayon, Miss Jam, ito na yung pinakahihintay ng lahat. Ang ating evaluation form. So here is the link of our evaluation form for our on-site and FB Live participants. You may scan the QR code or use the link to answer our evaluation form. Hanggang kailan open to, Miss Jam?
So, please take note po that our evaluation link for this hybrid seminar will be kept open until 11:59 p.m. today. So again po, 11:59 p.m. today lamang po.
And take note also that the issuance of certificate of participation, again, issuance of certificate of participation will be until December 11, 2025. So, inquiries regarding the certificate will only be entertained after this date.
Ayan. So, please go back po sa ating evaluation link slide. Ayan. So, we'll give you a couple of minutes po. No? Siguro mga, ilan kayang minuto, Miss Chai? Mga 3 to 5 minutes po para mag-answer ng ating evaluation form. Ayan.
Or they could take a screenshot kasi pwede sila sumagot hanggang 11:59 p.m. today.
Ayan. So, tara, Miss Chai, baka marami nang nag-comment sa ating FB Live.
Yes. And while waiting for them na magsagot ng ating evaluation form, let's have some shout out. So, Miss Jam, I was informed na meron pala tayong comments from our DOST-STII page. So, dun tayo mag-shout out. So, hello po, watching from San Marcelino, Zambales. Hello po sa mga viewers natin from Zambales. We also have from St. Michael Academy, Katarman, and Samar.
We also have from Paul Lea. Good morning, watching from Bacoor, Cavite. Also, good morning po, watching from Dasmariñas, Cavite. Iba't ibang panig na ng Cavite, Ma'am Chai.
Yes. And we also have Kian Molina from the Data Center College of the Philippines of Lawag City Incorporated.
Watching also from Tawi-Tawi Regional Cultural College, TRAC, Agricultural College. Sorry po.
We have viewer from John Buco Colegio de Jimenez Incorporated from Jimenez, Misamis Oriental din, Miss Jam. And also from AFGBMTS from Layas, Marilao, Bulacan.
Shout out daw po, watching from MSU Marawi. Also, good morning from La Consolacion, Pasig, Pasig City.
Meron din tayo from Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament. And we have watching from the Manuel S. Enverga University Foundation, Lucena City.
Good morning din daw po, watching from SMA Pasay. And also from DepEd Vigan City.
We also have participants from libraries. Umulit lang, sorry. Participants from Ilocos Sur
Kaya natin to, Miss Chai. Kaya natin to.
Kaya ba? Okay. We have participants from Ilocos Sur Polytechnic State College, Tagudin Campus.
Shout out din po from UP Visayas Library staff. Maayong aga sa tanan.
Hello po, Ma'am Rose. Teacher ko po siya. We also have from the University of San Agustin, Iloilo Library and Information Science Student Association.
Shout out din po from Davao Doctors College Library. Ayan,
Okay.
napakarami na po nating shout-outs, Miss Chai, ano? So,
And I think okay na sila with the evaluation.
ayan. So, for our on-site participants po, please stand by po muna tayo because we will have our photo opportunity with our resource speaker.
And And once again, thank you very much to all our participants in our second hybrid seminar.
So for now po, goodbye to everyone po muna. Enjoy your lunch and see you later at 1:30 p.m. for our third hybrid seminar. Ayan, enjoy your lunch po.
May we request all our on-site participants to join us here in front for photo taking na with our speaker.
Mababago ba ang sistema ng lipunang may problema?